All right, well, let's get into this show. This should be a good one. It's Friday, April 8th. But this is going to air next week, I think. So thanks for coming in again.
My pleasure, man.
We enjoyed having you on Drinking Bros. A lot of good feedback. We were talking about it before the show. You're British light. I think you're a good stepping stone for Americans who still are, upset about the whole colony situation.
I'm a gateway drug to the real Britain. Yeah, you're right.
Which is good because a week after hearing this, they're going to hear Douglas Murray, who's quite a bit more British than you.
Yeah, complete, 100% proof British. Very colonial, very imperial. Yeah.
he's yeah. He still wants the Falklands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's got to have it. You said before we got started here that you were you'd been friends with Douglas for a while.
Yeah.
How did you meet him?
Through the show. So I brought him on my show. We got on really well. And we just kept in touch ever since. And then I went out to New York about a month and a half ago and stayed with him in his apartment for a while. He makes a mean Manhattan cocktail.
Does he smoke it as well, or just straight up Manhattan?
Straight up Manhattan.
Okay.
Rye, usually.
Yeah, rye's better.
Uh-huh.
It's too sweet if you use anything other than rye, in my opinion. But
it's a cocktail that doesn't have anything in that isn't alcohol.
Yes, which is, that's what a cocktail is, right?
Well, yeah, but sometimes there's a mixer, Anyway, so, he's one of my favorite humans on the planet, and the episode that he does with you guys is going to be dope. I've got him on my show as well that same week. I'm really, really excited to see.
Yeah, where are you recording?
Just so I've got a long stay Airbnb at the moment in Austin near St. Edwards. And it's perfect. Quiet, rapid internet.
We did that for the first 2 weeks when we first moved here, actually. I had an Airbnb with a 2 or 3 bedroom Airbnb, and it was a nice living room with, it's actually downtown, like on 3rd or 4th Street. And it had a big glass window that you could see all the weird shit happening out on the street. So it was pretty good.
I always wonder, because I got a couple of cleans done since I've been there, and I always wonder what the cleaners think when they come in. They wonder if I'm doing like professional OnlyFans or something. Yeah,
no,
precisely.
It's definitely porn, yeah.
Precisely.
That's you have to assume that that's what they're thinking.
Everyone just defaults to porn.
Although maybe, independent media and podcasts are more...
Austin, yeah, perhaps.
LA,
now, porn, OnlyFans.
Van Nuys is definitely porn. So... For people who didn't see the episode of Drinking Bros you were on, give us a little background on you. You were you refer to yourself as a party boy, but you were a club promoter and shit?
Professional party boy, yeah, for about 15 years.
Man, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a long time. Stood on the door of about 1,000 club nights, right? Watched 1 million people go in and out of them. So that's tells you a lot about human nature, seeing people at 2 a.m. when they've had a lot to drink.
Yeah, the mask is off.
For sure. So did that, did some reality TV, went on the UK's version of Love Island, Blue Tick on Twitter and free charcoal toothpaste, all that stuff. Came off, started a podcast about 4 years ago, Modern Wisdom, and then we're nearly 500 episodes deep now, 3 episodes a week. And that's where my passion goes. Still run the events and stuff in the UK, still got the ownership and stuff back there. And then, I'm out here in Austin just having a fucking fantastic time.
How long have you been here?
4 weeks or so. I did about a month recorded with Jordan Peterson in San Ann, went to New York for a while, traveled around, came back, been here for about 4 weeks.
And the podcast, Modern Wisdom, people ask us about this a lot as well. There seems to be a gap in understanding how to be a human being from our parents' generation to Gen Z. Like, we've been able to figure it out, but we haven't done a very good job of communicating it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I can't tell if we're just treading water, and it's been so much just constant bullshit that, or maybe it's the digital age and kids are being raised by iPads now, but it seems like we haven't done a very good job of being a conduit about how to be a person.
To the people that are millennials to the people that are Gen Zers or whatever now?
Yeah. So from boomer and older X to younger X and millennial to Z.
Well, the problem with the boomer to our generation, right, is that the world changed so much. All the wisdom that our parents accrued no longer really works in this world. What are you going to tell me about how to date in a world that didn't have smartphones, let alone Instagram, let alone Tinder, right? You have a global dating marketplace now. When our parents were growing up, it was probably 2 to 1 men to women in college. And by 2030, it's going to be 2 to 1 women to men at 4-year US colleges. Women are out earning men between 20 and 30 by £1,000 a year. That would have been reversed by a huge margin. So all of the dynamics around things that people really care about, where they can live has been opened up with remote work. What they can do for a job. People don't have jobs for life anymore. The way that they get a relationship, all of that's changed. And we now have a society which is the oldest that it's ever been on average, and has the longest to live that it's ever had. So people are living longer, and they're currently the oldest on average. All of it, it's just, everything's upside down. So kind of, part of it is like, well, how would they have had many lessons that you could have passed on? However, I do agree that it is certainly the duty of the people now that are accruing that wisdom to try and pass it down, to try and teach people to operate well.
I think there's probably some fundamentals, right? Like, being a decent human being.
Telling the truth is the first one.
Well, telling the truth is in short supply. And not even just from person to person, but being honest with oneself now seems to be elusive. And it's interesting you mentioned the dynamics of human pair bonding. I mean, it's almost like diet, right? So 10,000 years ago, we struggled to find sugar and carbs, and we crave them now. Biologically, like at our core, we crave them, but we don't really need that shit like we used to. And part of the being honest thing is being honest about what the dynamics of gender attraction have been over the years, right? Women are better at certain things, men are better at certain things, hunting and fucking shit up and protecting people. Women are better at teaching kids how to not be assholes. But from the masculine point of view, I've always considered the main tenets of that to be to provide and protect, right? Just from a tribal humanity all the way through the present. And I guess if women are going to begin to out-earn men, that does disrupt that dynamic in some way. It isn't, I don't know why people would consider that taboo or sexist to even have that conversation, because it's reality that's happening. So maybe respond to what reality is, right? In a way that you can still be responsible. You don't have to be a cunt about everything. It seems like anytime you're disagreeable about something, like, no, that doesn't make sense. Or like, what are you, fucking transphobe? Like, no, dude, I'm just saying it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's a
Please explain it to me.
It's a unique situation that we're in now, where women are out-earning men. And you have a lot of movements that have come out of the side of this, right? So for the first time ever since records began, more than 50% of women are childless by 30, which is a bit of a shock. You have the number of men between the ages of 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the last year has tripled in the last 10 years, right? That's tripled in the last 10 years. That's wild to go through that. You have rates of divorce increasing, globalized sexual marketplace, all this sort of stuff. These are just changes to the environment. This isn't, you don't need to make a value judgment around this. But if people don't know, or if people aren't told, you can't adapt the way that you live appropriately.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's it. In no way, in no facet of life, whether it's math or science or, building something or being a doctor, like if you have bad data, that's not going to work out.
Less information is never a good thing.
And bad information is also like garbage in, garbage out. That's what GIGO, it's a data phrase that a lot of people use. And we seem to have, I like the phrase from John Haidt, prepare your kids for the road, don't prepare the road for your kids. Because you can't always do one, right? But we see our when I say our, I mean just establishment politics and social elites have kind of made it a point to have their reaction be to protect people from reality instead of to expose them to reality and teach them how to navigate it. Right? I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure we've ever done that as a species before.
Well, you've got two ways to bring somebody's capabilities in line with the challenges that they're going to meet, right? You can either bring their capabilities up or you can draw the challenges down.
Right.
And that's what helicopter or snowplow parenting, which is where you just completely move everything out of the way. I think we were talking about this on the show last time to do with the increases in peanut allergies.
Right, yep.
So people may be aware that you have a certain number of children that are predisposed to peanuts, but a purposeful exposure to them at low levels, you can actually buy, I think it's rice puffs coated in a very fine peanut dusting. And over time, you increase the dosage. It's like 1%, 5%, 10%, so on and so forth. And you do that over the course of a few months. And that actually enables that child to no longer be allergic to peanuts by the age of 3 or something. But if you don't do it and you wait until 5, then that's it. You're locked in for life. And what you have, because the furor around peanuts has meant that everything has been completely blitzed of it, children aren't having their, whatever you would say, like serendipitous exposure to it.
Right. But I mean, it's got that's the same. That's a very specific biological example of that. But think of all the social examples, right? Like low-level conflict resolution is so important for people. The metaphor I like to use is we start out really close together and we're whispering like, hey, I don't like that. Then we get farther apart and we're like full volume, hey, I don't like that. And then we're farther apart and we're yelling, hey, I don't fucking like that. And then we're so far apart that the only thing that we can reach each other with are projectiles, right? Like bombs and bullets and shit. And that seems to be happening. The more you stave off low-level conflict, the larger it becomes. I mean, we know that in our personal lives. You can't just fucking pretend like a problem doesn't exist into perpetuity and expect it's just going to go away. Bad news doesn't get better with time. And in every other fucking field of expertise, we do this. If you're teaching a kid to play baseball, you start out with a tee and a ball. Then a coach is pitching to him. Then they're pitching to each other. The mound gets farther. The field gets bigger. Yesterday was opening day for baseball. That's why I'm talking about baseball. I know you don't understand how it works.
Cricket, mate. You guys should try cricket.
I'm going to. Actually, our producer Bob over there.
I'm fucking down.
He downloaded a fucking cricket video game on his phone. He's been playing it.
It's fucking
I
dope.
have been, and I just I'm a total dick to all the foreigners that I beat in it when I beat them in it. Like you can't like type shit. You can't be like, yeah, I own you, you fucking Indian. But like you can like put out emojis that convey that you fucking
Some poor 12-year-old from Bangladesh.
Yeah,
being
it's a
abused
kid that
by
has
you.
nothing else in life.
Yeah.
And you took what he did
Awful.
half away from
the
him.
amount of
See, this is why you don't have nice things.
It is, yeah. It is, for sure. But yeah, anyways, the baseball metaphor is apt. And it's the same way, like if you were training somebody on a dangerous piece of machinery or even how to use a language, you start at the basics and you work your way up. And one of the most important things a human being is ever going to learn is how to treat and interact with other people, right? That might be the most important thing you ever learn. And we've taken that away from kids. Like if we see kids arguing on the playground, like, no, that's bullying. That's not okay. And maybe some of it is bullying, but there's going to be bullies in life.
So this is something that I keep on finding in pretty much every conversation I have, that there's a kernel of truth at the very sort of epicenter of it. And then what's happened is that's been blown out of proportion. And the kernel of truth that you have with that is some interactions between kids that involve disagreement is bullying.
For sure, yeah.
Therefore, there should be some amount of interjection done by teachers. If you just said, right, it's a free-for-all, it's like fucking Lord of the Flies or the Hunger Games or something. Out in the playground. That's not going to work. But again, because of this overbearing, overreaching lack of discomfort that we have, that we're predisposed to now. But dude, think about if your parents can Postmates a Michelin star meal to their house while they watch Netflix from a TV they Amazon primed from their phone, that, you know, everything now has snowplowed discomfort out of the world.
Yeah.
To the point that if you're not somebody that actively seeks it, it's very easy to avoid it.
It is. We've made like our hobbies now are to seek discomfort. It's so fucking weird.
We go out of our way to find active discomfort.
We have to, because society's tried to shield it. And look, one of the functions of society is to shield us from existential threats. And we've somehow managed to conflate discomfort with an existential threat when that could not be farther from the truth. Like, the only reason we exist is because of the discomfort we've gone through. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you can see people who avoid discomfort. Typically overweight, purple hair, right? I mean, for a very long time, from the 70s, probably until the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, excuse me, these folks kind of hid from society, or they had these little cliques. They were goth kids, or they were whatever, right? Out groups. And at some point, they were convinced that it wasn't their duty to find a way to join and navigate society, but it was society's duty to come find them and bring them, on board. And maybe that just goes in hand with the victim mentality. Man, that's dangerous.
There are only some people, though, to try and sing the, whatever you want to say, the positive note for this. Increasingly, I'm seeing people that understand that that's not the way that they want to live their life.
Right.
Think about the number of people that have CrossFit, right? As a workout methodology is absolutely ridiculous. Why would you choose, and I love it, but why would you choose to do that? It's just making your lungs bleed and making yourself hurt. It's a hurt locker. And the same thing goes for spin classes, for doing hot yoga, all this stuff, right?
Yeah, Andy Frisell is a buddy of mine. He's got that 75 hard bullshit at first.
I know so many people that have done that this year.
Like thousands and thousands of people who do that.
Did you?
Shit.
I didn't know
I have
this.
buddies that do it like 1 or 2 times a year at least.
I didn't know this until yesterday, that if you miss a day, you have to go back to the fucking beginning, man.
Like when I say miss a day, like if you don't read 10 pages.
If you miss one of the things on one of the days.
I might do it soon just to see if I can even do it. Like the hard part for me would be drinking, not because I don't really drink that much, but I own a fucking booze company and we do events all the time, and it would be kind of weird for me to be like, oh no, I don't drink.
You'd have to time it right.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Maybe I'll just keep that part out.
75 kind of hard.
Yeah, 75 medium. But yeah, people have made. I mean, it used to be that we would navigate the Oregon Trail, and now we go hiking for fun, or we go camping for fun, or we go hunt when we don't need to.
So I'm not sure that I see too much of a problem with people living lives of increased comfort with chosen discomfort outside of that, as long as they're able to bring that in. I understand that by offering most people a comfortable life, very few people on average, are going to choose to go and find discomfort, and you maybe have some externalities of too much comfort, right? Obesity and diabetes and depression and loneliness and stuff like that. If you can sedate yourself and kind of give yourself the simulacrum of connection through a phone, but not actually have that, you're sedated by something that's more easy to get than the real thing, but you're not getting the real thing, so you're actually degrading in terms of your quality of life.
It's the same thing you said last week about fame. Like, you get fame now without having to do any of the things that it used to require to get famous, like become a great political leader or become a great business person or something else. Or
Fame's an end in itself.
Yeah, like you've taken all the effort out of it, right? I mean, and that's not entirely true, because even a lot of these people who have gotten famous accidentally, I guess could say that, but a lot of people grind it out, right? But then the fame, just because you work hard at your job, doesn't mean people should listen when you talk.
That's the main concern that I have, I think, around what we're teaching young people to do with fame, is what does it teach people? It teaches people not to work very hard for a long period of time at one thing and develop mastery. It teaches them that you're supposed to have luck, right? That you just plucked out of obscurity and then put up on a pedestal through some reality TV show or through some random video of you drinking cranberry juice on a skateboard on TikTok or something. Like, that's how you do it. And I'm not convinced that creates the sort of generation atmosphere, work ethic that's actually going to develop anything other than more TikTok videos and more reality TV.
But don't you think the boomer version of work ethic, in my opinion, was noble but naive? And when I say naive, I mean that they were working for corporations that were doing very little for them, right? And now we've seen quite a bit more of that. Finally, there's this a lot of people refer to it as a reimagining of the workplace, working from home, I don't think is the big part of that. I think it's the relationship between workers and management. And I don't think that organized labor has done very much positive shit for like 100 years now, right? I mean, there's been some movement. I guess organized labor was pretty influential in the civil rights era. But since then, it's been kind of like a lot of corruption and a lot of people like Randy Weingarten at American Federation of Teachers, who, like, if you work for a teachers union or you're a teacher, your job, your first priority should be to do the best for children possible, I think, right? Like, if you're involved in any way in the process of developing children into adults, and it's just not been the case for these people. They've routinely, like, sabotaged movements that were actively helping kids. And over the last 2 years, they've tried really hard to keep schools closed down. And we have incontrovertible data that shows that is extremely harmful to children. So I wonder if we're not seeing some kind of overreaction now. I mean, you should expect that, right? If people are abused long enough, they're going to fucking lash out. And I wonder, like, everybody complains about not being able to find good workers anymore. I hate to just write that off as lazy. The next generation is lazy. You know what I mean? I think that is a weak answer to that question.
It's too simplistic.
Yeah.
People are products of whatever it is that they've been brought through. I think that you're right with noble and naive from our parents' generation. And you see that with their lack of understanding around leverage. Also, you didn't have as many accesses to leverage.
Well, people couldn't move across country and take a new job all of a sudden. Well, they could technically, but it was a much more Herculean task. God damn it. It was a huge effort to move from one place to another. I can't fucking talk today.
Yeah. So I think what you've done, you've enabled this sort of global workplace as well, right? You can be some dude in the northeast of the UK working freelance for pretty much any company on the planet now, especially after the pandemic. So that ability to leverage your work, to be able to write a program once and sell it to an unlimited, basically 7 billion people, that ability to have leverage is something that we need to teach people. And that completely flips the power from it being gatekept through organizations. So think about it this way. Up until sort of the 1400s, I think, in England, there was no non-Latin translation of the Bible available.
Yeah, until the 1511 King James Version, I believe.
I think it was Thomas Blackwell, I want to say, is the guy that did it, and he was killed for it, right? And what he was doing was he was making access to Scripture, access to God as well. He was emancipating that, right? He was creating that in a way that allowed the common people to get access to it.
I mean, it was intellectual feudalism, basically, right? I mean, that's what it is. And we're seeing it again today, but continue.
You had a gate-kept ability for the normal people to access God. You had to go to church, you had to believe, the priest was your conduit, right? From the normal person to God, priest the conduit. The same thing happened with work.
Yeah.
In between capital that workers wanted and the workers were companies. They mediated it.
Yeah.
They were the ones that were able to take it. You were some brass worker or some shit, right? Like, what are you going to do? Go and ask people that need brass if they need brass? Go door to door, yeah. Yeah, no, you can't do that, right? So you go to a company, and the company is now your conduit. Now we've had our King James Bible given to us.
Yeah, we have, but we haven't figured out what to do with it yet, I don't think. Right.
Some people have.
I don't know if the global market has figured it out either. So let's go backwards a little bit to, like, even the early 20th century in America, all these textile mills and shit. They would pay you part of your salary in advance in a currency that would only work at their company store. Right. So you live, let's say, Austin. Downtown Austin, there's a mill that makes fucking cotton, right? Or that makes stuff out of cotton. Everybody in town works there in some facility or some capacity. In the early 20th century, particularly in the South, my grandparents worked at a place like this. everybody that works there lives in the same neighborhood, a neighborhood that was built by the company, right? And you are buying the home from the company or leasing it from the company in some instances. And you have a general store, but it's actually a company store. It's a general store owned by the company because they know people aren't going to drive 45 minutes away to buy common goods, right? They're just going to buy right there. So that company controls almost every facet of your life.
So basically giving you tokens to then pay the company back to
Right.
live, to exist.
But that's feudalism. That's what it is. Like you can
like
work.
a baron that you need to live underneath.
You can work, but I'm getting a piece of that, right? And that seems extremely problematic. And it didn't take very long for it to happen in America where we said we weren't going to do that, right? We said we weren't going to do feudalism. We said we weren't going to do an aristocracy, but we almost immediately developed both of those things.
Why do you think that repurposes itself, reinvents itself?
Over and over. And since, like, even when the Vikings were first starting to fuck up mainland Europe a little bit.
They landed about 10 miles away from where I live in the UK.
Really?
Yeah. You can
What
go
was
see
that,
them.
like the 10th century?
Yes.
Late 10th century? Yeah. So, I mean, from what we still know about that, feudalism already existed then in England. I mean, the Roman Empire was feudalistic as well.
Okay, so is it just that when you have a concentration of power, people then begin to try and gatekeep access to that power by limiting things and by, how would you say, controlling people, by collaborating with other people that have got high amounts of power to continue to keep this position, this system in place?
I would think so, yeah. But I mean, it's also like taking it a step backward. Power concentrates. I think that's...
Yeah, power laws are everything.
That's the rule, right?
I mean, you guys understand this, right? Like your guys' network will account for the same as the bottom 50% of podcasts in America, right?
Yep.
Because they're all doing tiny amounts of plays. So
Right.
everything concentrates. This is Jordan Peterson's work. I had him on my show not long ago.
The hierarchy stuff, yeah.
Precisely, yeah. It concentrates at the top. And some of that's a good thing, you know? Like,
well, when it's a benevolent, when it's Augustus Caesar, it's a good thing. When it's fucking one of the assholes that followed after him, not so much. Right?
Nero.
Yeah, Nero was kind of a dick. I'm told, or a lunatic. One or the
Both.
other. Like, was he into cannibalism and shit?
I think he did some pretty wild stuff.
Like
I think pretty sure he
vampirism?
killed one of his like young boy lovers for some reason. Did some other kind of weird shit.
There's a lot of media propaganda about Nero who
boy,
just
here we go.
loved Rome.
Hang on,
okay? He
are we
was a
saying that
Roman patriot.
With disinformation from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. A lot
Shit,
of
son. Nothing's safe anymore.
It was MSNBC. They just didn't like Nero. But yeah, those are. It seems to be like gravity, right? The guy Steve, whatever that astronaut that discovered how accretion works. Remember?
No.
We didn't know how the moon came to be. We thought maybe it was a giant piece of rock that glanced off of us and just stayed in orbit or something like that. And then he put a bunch of salt in an empty bag while he was on the ISS and would shake it up and just look at it, and he would find that the salt would come back together somehow. So, I mean, that makes sense, but we didn't think about it at the time, right?
Is the effect of that purely because each grain of salt has a
Mass.
tiny amount of gravity, and then over time, okay.
Yeah, it has some amount of mass. Right. So, I mean, maybe power's just like that, and there's nothing you can do about that. So maybe it's important to pay attention to the kind of people that we're putting in power and not say, I'm voting for the lesser of two evils, for example, which is commonplace in America.
One of the problems that you have is that as soon as people get power, it's very, very difficult to take it back from them.
Nobody's ever voted their way out of a fucking tyranny, that's for sure.
Well, you can do two things the way that I see it, and this is an interesting discussion I wanted to have with you about kind of woke culture, especially seeing as we've both got Douglas coming on our show soon. There's two ways that I see that you can try and enact big social change, right? You can mandate it top down, bureaucracy, litigation, laws, advisories, guidelines, education, or you can try and make it emergent bottom up. And that's social enforcement, ridicule, satire, limitations placed on you by your family, expectations,
shame
praise.
is what you're...
Praise? No, praise as well.
Praise, shame and praise,
Yeah, correct. So you need to reinforce or disincentivize. And this example is so good. think about the word PC, right? Politically correct, which was maybe sort of early noughts, 2000s came out, and very, very quickly it was used, and then even more quickly it was used as a satire of itself, right? The PC brigade coming over. Then think about the word woke. Woke came up and was used unironically.
Yeah, for a while.
In the first instance.
Yeah.
Then very, very quickly, you get comedians and online commentators and smart people that weaponize that word against the people that are using it in a ridiculous way. And now you can't say woke unironically.
Right.
My point is that satire and ridicule and emergent bottom-up enforcement is so much more useful and powerful than top-down bureaucracy.
It's like an organic following. Like it can't be corrupted in the same way that something that was done intentionally can.
Well, think about the difference between someone telling you a rule, right? Let's say speed limits, right? You can be told that this is the speed limit, therefore you might stick to it.
Right.
The alternative is somebody close to you saying, "Man, like I really." A close friend of mine was hit by a driver who was going too quickly.
Or a sign that says danger ahead, people will slow down. But if it's a number, they won't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
that's weird, isn't it?
It's just the fact that you can try and litigate whatever you want out of existence and people will find a way around it. But if you make it so socially toxic to be associated with it that no one wants to, that's the most comprehensive panacea to shitty thought that you can think of.
You know, it kind of reminds me when you interjected with praise and not just the negative part. It reminds me of Joseph Fiennes' character in Enemy at the Gates. Have you seen Enemy at the Gates?
No.
It's a movie about Vasily Zaitsev. He was a Russian sniper during World War II. He killed like 500 fucking people or something. Look it up, Bob. How many people did Vasily Zaitsev kill? I think it was like 519 or some shit like that. He was pretty good at murdering Germans. Go ahead.
242.
Oh, that's it. Oh, I'm thinking of the Finnish dude. His face was all fucked up. Never mind.
Yeah, potentially. I'm trying to. I'll find
and
that guy.
there's some woman up there too that's pretty high on the kill list, and there's Carlos Hathcock, of course, U.S. Marine.
Did she poison a lot of people?
So the Finnish
guy
shot
him in the face.
Yeah, the Finnish guy was Simo. I'm not even going to try this last name.
No, I can't say it yet.
He had 542.
542.
The GOAT is actually an Iranian sniper during the Iran-Iraq War. Abdurrasul Zarin had 700 plus kills.
Yow.
Wow.
Shit, son.
Good for him. I mean, honestly, that's not that impressive to me. That's like beating up on third graders. I fought the Iraqis. They're not that good. But anyways, let's not get into a pissing contest with Iraq. We've already lost that, I guess. Yeah, but it reminded me of that because there's a point where the Politburo in Russia is pissed off that people keep running away from the fight and shit, so they start executing people. And the guy's like, look, you need to stop trying to force people into honorable positions and give them something honorable to aspire to.
Yes.
And that was Vasily Zaitsev. They started writing all these propaganda papers about him fucking killing Germans and shit. Mm-hmm. But it reminds me of, what's the dude's name? James Dobson. He's a Christian child psychologist. I'm not into religion, but I remember reading his book decades ago. And I think it was in the 90s. And one of the phrases was, the more frequently you catch your kids doing the right thing, the less frequently you'll catch them doing the wrong thing. And I agree with that. Just having worked in marketing for a company that now has a $5.5 billion market cap, I feel pretty confident in saying that hate sells, for sure. It'll get clicks and shit. But to get people to be a firebrand for your product, giving them something honorable to aspire to, aspirational marketing is so much more effective than anything else we do.
Well, think about what people want from a marketing campaign. You're telling them this is what your life will be like if you consume this product. That's the first thing that you learn when you try to start whatever it is that you're doing. You're not selling someone on the features of what your product does. You're selling them on the kind of life that they will have if they have it, right? That's a very aspirational, upward-focused, transcendent view. That's what people should be aiming for. Did I say this last time about in 2012, most people were voting for the hatred of the other party? Yeah. So 2012, the study showed that most people that were voting either Democrat or Republican weren't doing it out of love for their own party. They were doing it out of hatred for the other party. And that's the most fragile way that you can piece something together, because it's held together by mutual hatred of an out-group, not mutual love of an in-group.
Right.
And that means you're constantly vigilant for who's the next witch that we can burn at the stake, because they're not sufficiently pure. That's what the purity spiral is. The circular firing squad.
Yeah.
We just keep going. That story about the Russians clapping, one of the previous Russian Tsars or something, made everybody stand up and clap, and everybody kept on clapping, and everybody kept on clapping, and the first person that stopped was shot.
Jesus Christ.
So you go, okay, like, what do you want here?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a better point than fear or shame, or a better methodology. I mean, the woke mob clearly is just trying to shame everybody into being what they want them to be, and I think it's a great misunderstanding of what motivates human beings. And maybe it's a lot of it is like revenge.
Fear.
Yeah.
A lot of fear,
Yeah.
I think. Hell of a lot of fear.
But it's a misunderstanding, I think. Like,
if you want it to be effective, you should do it in a different way. 100%.
Well, like the left in America, say what you want about the coarseness of the way Trump campaigned in 2016, but "Make America Great Again" was what he kept saying, right? And while the left was trying to shame people into doing things, he kept saying, this country can be great again, we just have to do this. And woke people thought that everybody that voted for him, everybody that was Republican, was a racist, right? Instead of just realizing that, no, they were responding to the fact that he was, despite being a coarse speaker, definitely there was a positive tone to everything.
Hopeful.
Yeah. And that's, I think it's led to a lot of stupid bullshit, to be honest. Like the antagonistic relationship between, like if somebody says we need to make this country great again, and what can your response be to that? The country's already great. So you don't have any problems with the country or how it's going because you fucking protest and bitch all the time, right? I'm not telling everybody to go buy a fucking red hat. I'm just saying that it's very clear that hopeful and aspirational marketing, whether it's in products or campaigns, works entirely better. And that's something you should pay attention to. Like if you're working in any form of natural sciences, from physics to fucking biology, whatever it is, or if you're working in psychology, you have to pay attention to the things that don't go against the grain, stuff that happens freely, right? And then try to take advantage of those things.
That's playing on easy mode as opposed to playing on hard mode. Yeah.
I mean, it's like fucking Buddhism. Go where the wind takes you. But that people go, oh, that's a bunch of hippie bullshit. Like, no. Why the fuck are you trying to ice skate uphill? Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And it doesn't make any sense that the response to it was everybody on that other side must have a negative motivation because they want the country to be great. I mean, that's a non sequitur. That doesn't make any sense to me.
One of the problems that you have, if someone or some group decides to start speaking in a negative way, one of the few, it's very easy to get drawn into a hypocritical pointing match, right? You've identified a problem with my side.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to identify a problem with your side.
Instead of addressing the problem with my side.
Or instead of saying, okay, how do we just make this better? Because that's a problem-oriented viewpoint, not a solution-oriented viewpoint. So this is one of my criticisms with the right, is that because they're so focused, myopically focused on the ridiculousness that comes from the left, they're constantly playing defense.
Yeah.
All that they do is play defense. And I understand you have got the most recent transgression of women's sports or bathrooms or media lying or bias or agenda or whatever, right? You have a thing which happens. The media lies. Okay, we get it, right? That's a thing. It happens. But if all that you're ever doing is reacting to what happens from usually either the left or media, you don't ever actually end up proposing anything. You don't ever move your own agenda forward because you're constantly playing defense in a reactionary way.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how much you pay attention to American politics. I mean, it's been kind of impossible not to for the last 5 or 6 years.
It's like a soap opera,
yeah. But there hasn't been a really conservative president since probably Eisenhower, right after World War II. You could make an argument, I guess, for Nixon a little bit, but Reagan raised taxes in 5 of the 8 years he was in office, tripled the national debt. Bush Senior, maybe, right? But he's an establishment CIA guy whose dad was in the oil business. Like, how conservative could he be? George W. Bush presided over the largest expansion of the federal government in the history of this country and started 2 wars meant to be regime change wars, right? That's not what conservatives do either. Like, we're coming off the Monroe Doctrine in the early 20th century. All of a sudden, we're fucking doing nation building, which he campaigned against, by the way. I guess you could call Trump conservative to some degree, certainly not Republican. But now I don't even know what that means.
Well, we were talking about this before we started, that the distinction now between left and right is arbitrary.
It is, yeah.
It's no longer what it was, right? Left and right were about class, typically.
Right. Yeah.
That was what it was about.
Yeah, the left was supposed to be the party of the working class, right? But, I mean, Bhatia talks about this quite a bit. That is just simply not the case anymore, and it hasn't been for quite a while. So there is no party for the working class anymore. And you're seeing people get more and more disillusioned by these shitbag politicians. Stacey Abrams lost an election and quadrupled her net worth in 2 years after. That probably shouldn't be the case. Fuck, man. Actually, the Daily Beast, which is as left as it gets, wrote an article about that this morning. Like, hey, what the fuck?
Even them, they're throwing their own under the bus.
But that's the thing. That's what you're saying. This is a byproduct of what you're saying. There is a blurred line between, because these two institutions no longer do what they're supposed to do. People are shocked that Trump got elected. Why? People were tired of fucking politicians. Of course they're going to elect a reality TV star, which is how we get half of our fucking news these days, right? And no surprise at all to me.
Well, there was no surprise in the UK when, I don't know whether you looked at the 2019 general election, the biggest landslide change ever since like the 70s, like 40, 50 years.
You mean from like Tories to Conservatives?
Correct. Yeah, so Tories and Conservatives are the same.
Labour Labour, yeah, sorry.
Labour's the other one. So they lost seats in the most working class towns, people whose daddies were miners and their daddies were miners, and they hated Margaret Thatcher and blah, blah, blah. So, and you had these Labour strongholds that had been completely whitewashed.
Right.
And that happened in 2019. And what I said to my friends was, what you've got is this sort of very bourgeois, very stuffy, academic, intellectual view from the left about what's important for working class people and what they should focus on, which doesn't resonate with what they've got. That's why they're not concerned, right? Now, rolling the clock, this is early 2020, and I'm thinking, okay, are we going to see the same thing?
This is on the heels of the Brexit vote, too, which was...
Correct. Are we going to see the same thing happen in America?
Yeah.
And what happened, what would have been really, really interesting would have been if Trump had won, even if it was only by a small amount, because you could have then made a very strong case. Look, this wokey identity politics thing isn't working. And the bottom line is that politicians and governments need to stay in power. So for as long as they can try and inject an ideology into what it is that they do, the first thing that they need to try and do is be effective, right? They need to actually get themselves fucking voted in.
You would think it would be a meritocracy of some sort, but the agents of the meritocracy are us. In how we react to their bullshit. And if we accept it, or if large people do.
Not being effective at doing their job, being effective at being voted in.
Correct, yes.
So being effective at being voted in for rolling in 2020 election, what's going to happen? Are we going to get there? And had you have had two huge kind of upsets, both in the UK
West,
and in the USA, I think that you would have had a very different view around identity politics and wokeness, because you'd have said, look, bottom line is this stuff just seems to not resonate with the electorate, and that is the thing that politicians fundamentally care about. Rolling the clock forward, 2022, have you got a preference for who you want to run for the Republican Party, if you could pick?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I mean, I don't give a fuck about the Republican Party, to be honest.
But you care about conservatives and conservative values, it seems. They're not going to be enacted by
to some
Democrats.
degree. Like there are liberal values that I think are important as well. Like I think that this is my big problem with all this, the tumult in the discourse. There are just so many studies that show an intact household with a masculine figure and a feminine figure produce the best children. Now, sometimes it's two fucking gay dudes. Sometimes it's two lesbians. Sometimes it's a man and a woman. Sometimes it's a single mom with a fucking uncle or a football coach or something. But that produces the best outcome, and there's no question about that, right? And I think in politics it's the same way that gravity and power, right, are the same. We need a debate. Well, first of all, we have to establish certain principles that we all agree on, right? Like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, for example. We wrote a document about it. Sorry about kicking you guys out.
Didn't want it anyway.
Yeah. We have to agree on certain principles, but this debate between strength and empathy has to happen. And it has to happen in a genuine way with everybody's cards on the table. And it's not. It's not happening. And everybody's forgotten who they are in the conversation. Now we're fucked, right? So I care about conservatism insofar as I think that individual liberty and personal entrepreneurship are the ultimate inoculation to tyranny. I believe that. But I also believe that telling people that they can be as healthy as they can afford to be in the wealthiest country in the history of the world is immoral at best, if not fucking outright evil. So we can have these conversations about healthcare and shit like that and national defense, and I'm here for it. But I don't believe any of these people that are telling me stuff when they're trying to just get in power. You know what I mean? I don't trust any politician.
Not having nationalized healthcare as someone that comes from England, where we have, and for people that don't know, that means that whatever happens to you, you get taken into hospital and it gets fixed.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost you anything. You don't pay insurance. You pay your taxes, right, which everybody already pays. It gets fixed. There's no, you've lost 3 fingers, but you can only afford to put 2 back on. Yeah. There's none of this bullshit, right? Not having that, to me, seems primitive and barbaric.
Yeah.
It seems
I mean, it begins...
insane.
Having a healthcare apparatus like that begins from the premise that our human capital is our most important resource. And I believe that more than anything.
What do you think America thinks, or what do you think the people in power of America believe is their most important resource?
Well, I mean, it depends on which group of people you ask, right? The patrician class is going to say power because they think that whether they'll say it out loud or not, and every now and again they do it on accident, you guys aren't smart enough to do this.
Trust us.
Yeah, we're going to handle it for you.
We'll look after you.
Yeah, which is anybody that begins a conversation with trust me, don't. That's a pretty good rule of thumb, right? Because people that deserve trust usually don't have to ask for it. That being said, I do think it's probably better. I can't think of somebody on the left that I would trust to be in charge right now. I would like there to be, but I don't know if I can think of anybody just off the top of my head. I mean, a lot of Republicans are infatuated with Joe Manchin, but this dude is so wrapped up in coal investments and stuff. Like he's making millions of dollars off of the decisions he's making.
Is your man from Florida not got a good chance?
DeSantis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, he's Republican. I'm talking about, just thinking about the left versus right thing.
Okay, yeah.
Like, there's no way Biden doesn't know where he is. The other day when Obama shows up to the White House, he's like wandering around, doesn't know where he is. Nobody wants to talk to him.
Can you imagine? So obviously everybody knows that he's got some age-related sort of degradation. Can you imagine being the probably group of people that's in charge of being his carer or minder? You know, the guy or collection of guys whose job it is to roll Joe out and to make sure that he doesn't start talking about his leg hairs, that he doesn't forget somebody's name, that he doesn't try and...
Well, we've seen him cut mics, cut video feeds.
But can you imagine, like, the level of ambient anxiety? I always think about, you know, because we see the front end, but I'm fascinated by the back end.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by what it's like behind the scenes. That guy that goes to work every day and his wife says to him, honey, what have you got going on today? And he goes, oh, well, I'm taking ex-President Obama's coming to the White House. It's going to be a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, it would be really, and I think it would be super interesting to have a genuinely honest conversation with Jen Psaki. Like, that would be amazing. Because just the stuff that she would know and have to tell you if she was like, if you gave her if it was like the movie Liar Liar and she all of a sudden couldn't lie to you. And that's the same for any White House press secretary, I guess. But this one seems particularly bad because they're hiding cognitive decline, which I find problematic.
Who's that? Who's that congresswoman that was in the armed forces?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, she's Democrat, right?
Sort of. She's like a blue dog Democrat, which is to say a little bit more conservative on things like national defense and border security.
Given that she's from the armed forces, makes
Yeah.
a good bit of sense. But I mean, she would be. People seem to respect her and trust her.
She ran as a Republican, and the powers that be hated her.
No, Democrat. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
So she, like in the first presidential debate in 2020 for the Democrats, she lit Kamala Harris the fuck up, and Kamala Harris dropped out 2 days later. Like she ended her campaign. And then,
I love some girl-on-girl action.
yeah, well, clip that. Yeah, but and then in the weeks following that, Hillary Clinton started to propagandize that she was a Russian asset. This woman who is a major or lieutenant colonel now, a helicopter pilot who transitioned over to civil affairs, I believe, actively serving our country, is a Russian agent. She was allowed to say all that stuff with no recourse taken against her. But yeah, I like Tulsi. I mean, I feel like she says she falls into that trap of saying what people want to hear a lot. The other guy you were referring to, DeSantis in Florida, the governor, yeah, I like him. Seems like an art guy. I mean, compared to the people that are in charge now, it's not even close.
He definitely seems like he's got a backbone.
He seems like Trump without Twitter, which I think is something that a lot of people really wanted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Stop tweeting, please.
Like if we all know the rules of the game. These people are trying to find any reason they can to stop you from doing the shit you're trying to do, and you're giving them all the ammunition they need. Why? Like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I understand a lot of what he was saying because I disagree with all the talk about voting machines and shit like that. I just think it's like you don't need to hack voting machines when you can hack people's minds. When they think that all Republicans are racist because of X, Y, Z, the dynamics that you mentioned before, right, of social anxiety and shame and shit come into play. Well, I don't want to be associated with that, so I'm not going to vote for him. It's exhausting.
Well, that was a much simpler solution, right?
Yeah, it's Hanlon's razor.
Correct.
Like, and also quite a
It's
bit more
both
effective.
Occam's and Hanlon's,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Do not
yeah,
attribute
yeah.
to malice that which can be explained
Yeah.
by stupidity, and the
And the
one that has the
simplest
least.
answer,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
often correct.
it's definitely. I mean, just think about that. What's more difficult, to have some fucking click farms in Bangladesh churning out content that's making the other side look bad and propagandizing on a digital media platform that reaches 3.5 billion people, or to hack individual voting machines? You fucking kidding me, dude?
Where's the paper trail going to be?
Yeah,
more
like that's stupid.
serious?
That doesn't make any sense. Well, one of the things we found with Dominion is that there would never be a paper trail either way, which seems problematic. But even then, I've been involved in enough war and conflict and intrigue, I guess, to know that there are people who try to outsmart themselves sometimes and fuck up, but it's really obvious. Most people that are trying to do shit like that just take the path of least resistance. What's the easiest way that we can make the biggest impact? And it's clearly just through social media. Like, you don't...
Do you think that there'll ever be, or how long do you think it'll be until there's an uncontested election again? Because there's no way that your next one is going to happen and then not be whoever wins. Huge allegations around voter fraud, voter ID, restrictions around minorities being able to vote, or these people, or access, or remote voting, or postal voting, or any of that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and it's not just even it's not even up to the system or institution itself. It's up to how the media and social media report it. I mean, if this narrative is going to continue, that certain groups of the population are incapable of getting identification, which I've not seen any evidence to that effect, then there's always going to be that argument, regardless of what else happens. And even if it's a landslide victory, you still can argue. Like, if there's a landslide victory and a minority population gets disenfranchised, even if it's less than what it would have taken to win the election, that's still a fucking problem. I mean, and I mean that sincerely. That's a real problem if anybody gets disenfranchised. But it seems to me, again, there's a simple solution to this. If there are members of the community, let's say this premise is true, like steel man the argument. Let's say there are certain people, because of class, excuse me, or race or whatever the fuck else, can't get ID to go vote. So let's go out there and get them ID. That's the solution, not to weaken the fucking integrity of our election. How could it be the latter? That doesn't make any sense. Why not just go fucking find these folks? Like, hey, you want to vote? Cool. Are you on paper? You're not on paper? Cool. Let's get you fucking registered to vote. Here's your ID. Done. I will, if instead of when you file your taxes here, they ask you if you want to donate to the fucking elections. I always check no, because fuck that. But if it was, do you want to donate to make sure every human being in this country has
vote.
an ID and those who are eligible can vote, then I'm all in on that, right? Like that is the very obvious solution to that. But that's not a wedge. That's an actual solution, and we've learned it from American healthcare. We don't sell cures here. We sell fucking treatment. And it's a big fucking problem. And that's why I'm black-pilled.
I haven't noticed.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed at all. Yeah, it's a strange one, man. I'm going to be the problem that I have, or one of the main problems that I have, is that whatever happens in the US, if you guys cough, then we catch a cold.
Right.
And
well, hopefully our housing market doesn't crash again and fuck over the entire world.
That would suck. Yes, that wouldn't be good. But culturally as well, you know, we had BLM protests in the UK. Thankfully, ours didn't involve raiding Foot Lockers and setting shit on fire and stuff like that. But we do kind of like America light now. You know, the same like difference I am to Douglas Murray, like we are to you guys.
Right.
And that does concern me, because there's some things that happen over here that you think, I'm really fucking glad that we don't have that in the UK.
Right.
And the problem is that because of the ubiquity of social media and the, for better or worse, still the sort of cultural leadership that you guys hold in the world, that's increasing the susceptibility that other countries have to you guys. Tell you who doesn't seem to be fucking impacted by it, Australia. Australia just, their news organ. Have you seen Sky News in Australia? Those guys just go after whatever they want.
Yeah, I'm surprised, to be honest, as authoritarian as their government has appeared over the last couple of years, that agency has been able to get away with pretty much everything they want to. And maybe, like that, a lot of people, conspiracy theorists, would call that controlled opposition, right? We're allowing them to exist. So, like, people can rah-rah. It's like the Coliseum, right? Like, you can get all excited and we'll throw you some bread, but don't come up to my fucking palace or I'll kill you.
Difficult to falsify that hypothesis, eh?
Certainly, yeah. It's black pills are always difficult to falsify, right? Because it's cynical in nature.
Always
like
encompassing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I said this the other day. I'm black pilled because I don't believe that any form of government scales. Like, I feel like in the West, from English common law to our Constitution in the U.S., this is a pretty good attempt at creating a government that that is truly for and by the people, and it's, in my opinion, is failing, and it's not failing because of the content of the ideology itself. It's failing because at some point on the scale, corruption and abuse of power becomes inevitable, and it becomes so large that you can't do anything about it anymore. And I would rather hunt and build my own shit, frankly.
Have you had Michael Malice on?
No, but I know who he is.
Dude.
Good dude.
Please. So his new book's called The White Pill, which he's currently through like the second draft or some shit of it. And I would really, really love to see you sit down and have a reach out to him, bring him on.
Yeah, well, he's down the street here, right? He's
Yeah,
not too far away.
He's in town. And his new book's The White Pill. And hearing what he's talking about here, because he has a lot of the same viewpoints as you, right? You know, he's way below libertarian. He's anarchist, right?
Yeah.
And on top of that as well, his research for his new book is taking him way, way into the depths of depravity. The corporate media, the enemy of the people, right? That's his thing.
Yeah, I've heard him say that quite a bit, actually.
And he should have it tattooed on him.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if he's read The Master Switch. Have you ever read that book?
no.
I think it's back here, actually.
Should be.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give it to you before you leave. You can read it, break it back. It's
You're going to blackbill me?
man, it's going to go a long way. It'll help. It kind of illustrates how governments throughout history, anytime there's emerging technology, they seize control of it and weaponize it, either against other countries or against the population, right? So, like the telecommunications industry, the internet, the printing press, like all sorts of stuff. Very interesting.
Well, Malice has been going through all of this research, right, about the way that the New York Times has been complicit in all sorts of cover-ups and terrible things and journalists and blah, blah. And yet he has managed to come out the other side of it with a message of hope. So I'm hoping that I want to see black versus white pill.
Well, I'm hopeful as well. I'm hopeful insofar as I think Texas should secede from the rest of the United States.
Who else should secede from the rest of the United States?
Whomever wants to, right? I mean, we created a government that was completely voluntary, but only up to a point. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of organization can you join and never get out of? I could think of gangs and the mafia. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? I mean, if there's
cults,
if we really cults, yeah, if we believe in capitalism the way we say we do, then choice is the ultimate determining factor, right? The
freedom.
The game theory that's out there is just, that's all a very complicated explanation to how most people come to fucking a decision about how they're going to spend their time and money. That's really what it is. And the idea that somebody, and I know that this is this may be like a unique American trait or characteristic, but the idea that somebody might tell me what to do, not with that at all. Like, I will accept some of your rules because they're convenient and they make things safer, but once you encroach into my life, now it's time to fight. So when the White House press secretary says that the Department of Justice is going to start going after governments, state governments and legislatures that are banning genital mutilation in children, for example, now it's time to fight, in my opinion. Like, if you're coming after kids and doing irreparable damage to them, then that, to me, is enough to fucking, when I say fight, I mean literally fight. Like, something's got to be done about that. And it can't be taken lightly. Like, a lot of people get emotionally involved and rah, fuck them, you're not going to, and that's where that's the basis. It's like a fuck you attitude. But that's not where I'm coming from. I think it is very clearly and demonstrably true that individual liberty, as I said before, is the inoculation to tyranny. And we are not seeing that. And now it's almost like a toddler who's trying to see how much more they can get away with. They keep piling on. Like, it wasn't enough that a fucking nominee to the Supreme Court couldn't define what a fucking woman is. Now they want to indoctrinate your kids, and when you call them out for it, they say you're like homophobic or some phobia of some sort you have. No, I care about kids being able to develop naturally, and if they decide to do some shit later, that's their decision. I don't co-parent with the fucking state. You know what I mean? That seems pretty clear and obvious to me.
It does feel like overreach, right? That you've gone from the rules around education of what? Yeah. Education about how fucking plants work, right? And about how 2 + 2 = 5. Not about sex for children that are too young to spell the word, right? Like, if you can't spell it, don't talk about it. And so a bunch of my friends are in teaching. And a ton of children because of the pandemic. And this is, forget about masking policies and homeschooling and stuff like that. Just the inevitable side effect, a non-partisan inevitable side effect of having a pandemic was that children were going to be underschooled, right? And you have 6- and 7-year-old children who can't spell their own name, who can't count. And you think...
There's also a lot of delays in verbal development as well, which is a big fucking problem.
Due to masking?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was an inevitable...
Verbal and communication in general, 80% of communication is nonverbal, right? So now we're crippling them in every possible way that they can communicate with another kid, and then we're shutting off their ability to have any kind of low-level conflict interaction.
Well, the way that they're taught to speak is through phonics. So cat, k, at, t, right? Look at you need to see the mouth. You need to look at the facial expression, right? Forget the emotional development, which is just a bomb waiting to go off later down the line. You need to be able to see people's faces to be able to do that. So yeah, I understand, man. I mean, you are right about the encroaching, but roll the clock back to kind of, I guess, the genesis of this, or at least when I first started to learn about it or think about it, the example that's first used is the NSA after 9/11. You go, okay, here is you know how a ratchet works, right? So you
mean the Patriot Act and shit like that? Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So you click and click and click, and then pressure, but it doesn't go back. It's still only able to go one way.
Right.
And this was a very obvious example of when we saw state power being given and then never given back.
Right, which it happened under, again, a Republican. That's not how that's supposed to work.
That being said, it should, I don't think that many people in the period after 9/11 wouldn't have said, throw the kitchen sink at it. We cannot have this happen again. We don't want this to happen again. We kind of don't know how it happened. Is it an intelligence failure? Do we do whatever? We have this technology. Can we make it work? Is it going to make us safer? Like that stuff. But here's again, remember what we said earlier on about the kernel of truth. Kernel of truth is in there. Terrible tragedy, needs to not happen again. We have a technology that may be able to help us from stopping it happening again. So we let it happen. But power coalesces, power laws, dominance hierarchies, all of that stuff. When people have got it, they're not going to let it go away anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Russ Feingold was the only person to vote against it. He was a senator from Wisconsin, and he got defeated in the next election. It's a wildly popular senator, one of the most popular senators in the entire country.
And he was defeated because of his...
I don't know why.
Right.
But...
correlation.
I mean, the vote was 98-1, and he was the only guy that got voted out next time, so... but yeah, I agree with that to some degree. You would be after some kind of attack, I have a security background. After an attack or an intrusion, that's the best time to plan your new strategy because now the enemy's kind of tipped their hand a little bit. So we know kind of how they react, and then this is the same debate that we should always have in good faith about any kind of issue that leads back to a constitutional right. That is to say, is there some amount of that I'm willing to concede that makes sense to make things safer for myself, my family, the future of this country, everybody, so on and so forth, right? Don't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. That's a crime. It's incitement of violence. Don't tell somebody to go hurt somebody else. Those are pretty obvious ones. But when the interchange removes the agency from the individual and puts it in the hands of the state, that's where I have the problem. Because the state can't be trusted, and they've shown that over and over and over again. And statehood in general, globally, throughout all of human history, has shown that. The most obvious example to me is gun rights. So there's no question, and I get tired of conservatives refusing to have this conversation. There's no question that adding a gun to a situation makes it intrinsically more dangerous. The end of that conversation.
Yeah, we have very few mass shootings in the UK.
Quite a few stabbings, but not so much anymore. It's toned down quite a bit.
A little bit, but it's generally harder to kill someone with a knife than with a gun.
Right. But what is the purpose of the Second Amendment? It's not to fight off an invading army, in my opinion. It is, we were coming off of a time when weapons were used to force us to do things we didn't want to do by the state. So our framers said, we're not doing that again. So you guys can all have guns just like we can. And they wrote it down on paper, and they all signed it. And there are certain situations where we need to have a fucking conversation. For example, the terror watch list doesn't talk to the handgun registry list. So you can be on the terror watch list and legally buy a handgun in the United States. That is a true statement. Probably shouldn't be the case, right? But do I want the government having a document that shows where, like, all the guns are and who has them? Fuck no, because they can't be trusted. They just can't. So I err on the side of liberty every single time, even if there's some intrinsic danger attached to it, because that's our job to police that. It's not the state's job. The state's job is to keep people from outside from hurting us. Our job is to keep ourselves safe here, and that's why we develop professional policing and shit. And none of the professional police I know are arguing in favor of confiscating guns or banning guns, because they all own guns. You know what I mean?
I was driving through Lockhart near here, and I think it's the Lone Star shooting range out there. And what's the word? It's not constable. It's a particular type, a particular grade of police officer. Not.
I mean, a constable is one of them.
Is it? Oh, yeah. So it was constables then. I thought that was underneath.
A constable works for the county, and they do certain things. So they're not like a patrol officer. Like a sheriff and their deputies are the enforcement wing, I guess, for the most part, for a county. They run the jails typically, and the county police and shit like that, unincorporated areas inside of a county. Constables serve like subpoenas or they do a lot of civic shit, I think, here in Texas.
Okay.
But they would go inspect a gun range and make sure everything's legit there, for example.
There was, I shit you not, 15 constable cars lined up before it opened. This is 9 a.m, going out to see Kyle Kingsbury. And they're all lining up to go, and obviously they've all got their gun bags out back. They're all loading up ammo, and they're all going to go and do that.
Yep.
You think the line between law enforcement and firearms, access to guns, gun control, gun rights. Right. These are the people that are dealing with the problems, and yet they're the ones that are closest to using them as well. A lot of the guys are passionate about not only the law, but about the use and about the art form.
Well, a lot of these guys, Tim Kennedy runs a training for them, right?
Sheepdog response.
Sheepdog. But that Sheepdog is also for civilians and stuff, but he runs like police officer specific training at least once a month, I think, which entails there's a day of combatives, there's a day of handgun, shotgun, and then carbine, right? So like all the weapons, including your own body, that you might use. Mike Glover does the same thing all over the country.
And that guy from Detroit as well, that's big on
no,
TikTok. Yes.
Not that guy.
Have you not seen him?
The guy is retarded.
No, he's a lethal weapon. Him, Steven Seagal.
If I could get you, have you seen that new Nick Cage movie where he kind of plays a parody of himself?
No.
So
you were talking about it last time.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm told it's really funny. So it's like Nick Cage is Nick Cage, and he's a washed-up actor as Nick Cage, I guess, kind of is. I don't know. I still watch his movies. I think they're good.
Yeah.
But they come to him like, hey, we're going to make a movie about you, making a movie about you.
Yep.
And he's like, I don't know. And then finally convince him. If we could get that Detroit, whatever the fuck, dude to make a movie about himself, that'd be the best. I think the internet would melt.
Tim Kennedy and him need to do... You remember how before MMA... fake martial arts like chi push and one-touch knockouts and all that stuff. That was a thing.
Joe Rogan used to post that shit. It was like stupid martial arts or something. There was an account on Facebook that Joe Rogan used to post all the time.
Yeah, and you would have some kickboxer go in the ring with some chi.
And just beat the Christ out of him.
Yeah. Beat the chi out of him.
Yeah.
And you need to see... I want to see Tim Kennedy. He's the savior that we need for you Detroit man.
He might, man, I don't know. I mean, maybe we do it 6 miles off the coast in international waters so Tim doesn't go to prison forever.
Tim literally just rips him in half.
Yeah.
Like pulls limbs from body.
Yeah. Don't they do, at Sheepdog Response, don't they do live taser stuff as well? Like they have an actual functioning taser.
Yep.
So that you see just how difficult it is to not get tased.
Yeah, I mean, it's also difficult to tase someone properly, right?
What do you mean by properly?
So the two prongs that come out
Yep.
of the end of the taser, they need to land in two separate muscle groups, so your pec and your abdomen.
That's interesting.
If it lands in both in your abdomen, yeah, it's going to crunch a little bit, but you can keep walking forward.
So you need to be far enough away.
The ideal range, I think, is 3 to 9 feet.
You've been tased?
Yes,
You've been tased with a hand taser?
both. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only been tased with a hand taser. Wasn't fun.
I didn't get shot with the projectile. They'll deploy it and then clip one to your collar and one to your belt. It is not fun. I mean, some people will let them shoot you in the back. Like, I think police officers have to do that.
You're kidding.
But I didn't want to because it's basically a straight fish hook, right? There's
Yeah.
a barb on the end, and a fucking medic has to come pull that shit out. I don't want to do that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Like, just shock me, dude. I don't need to feel more pain. But it is the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. But it was
Really?
immediately over afterwards. I mean, you've been tased.
Yeah, I only tased with the handheld. And
With like a stun gun.
no, well, whatever it is. I don't know. It was a big one. It was a big boy.
So they just did a contact shot on
Yes.
it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that
you hit the
still
deck
sucks.
immediately. Right?
Yeah, it's not fun.
Fuck.
It's not fun. But yeah, I mean,
You hear those stories about people that are on high on whatever the fuck,
Yeah.
and people are tasing them, and it just walking straight through it.
yeah. I want some of whatever that is.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
precisely. That's what that Detroit guy plus that drug versus Tim Kennedy. International waters celebrity death match.
Now that might be a fucking
Fair fight.
contest. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that guy's a fucking goober. Some TikToker not too long or YouTuber not too long ago fucking embarrassed him again. He gets embarrassed on a pretty regular basis. But now he's doing like cameos and stuff. I think he's a troll. I don't think any of it's real. But I am told that some people go there looking for training. Like, oh man.
He's like the liver king of self-defense.
Yeah.
The Viking walk or the farmer's walk or whatever he calls it.
Yeah, he was doing it in Liver King was in New York on the subway, doing lunges and burpees with his top off, wearing like a Bergen on his back.
Just eating raw meat out of a bag or some shit.
Dude, if people click on stuff like that and you're playing the game that well, like, who's the fool? Who's the fool here? Is it the person that's watching and commenting and sharing your shit, or is it you for whatever, gaining a few million followers?
Yeah, it's immoral to let a sucker keep his money, right?
What is it that they say about investing? The investment market is a tool for moving money from people with patience to people without patience. It's like
yeah.
the Liver King is a tool for moving money from people that are smart to people that aren't smart.
I'm also told that the lottery is a tool to
Tax for stupid people.
get welfare checks back from poor people. Or maybe that's scratcher tickets. I don't know. I guess it's
Same
kind of the
thing.
same, yeah. But back to what we were talking about with the with the gun rights stuff. Like I think we have options to deal with something like that, right? One option is to realize that there are some bad if you know, half of 1% of people are bad actors, we still got a fuckload of bad actors. We got 1.5 million assholes out there. That's a lot. That's bigger than our army, than the active part of our army. Not to say that they would, you know, do shit like that, but there's somebody that everybody knows. Like, no matter how staunch of a gun supporter you are, or a gun rights supporter you are, everybody that can hear the sound of my voice knows one person that should not have a fucking gun. But is the solution to give the state power to decide who has guns? The answer to that is fucking no, because we know what they're going to do with that. Anytime we give them power, as you said earlier, you don't get it back. And I think we're on... The picture has been taken at the top of the roller coaster, and we're on our way down.
What do you mean?
Society in general. I think it's... we've seen these... and it almost happened in the middle of the 20th century as well. But we see this a lot. We have solutions to problems for so long that we forget what the problem was that solution solved.
Yeah.
And we have to relearn that a lot. The issue is now... I mean, back in the day, in the 19th century, if you just ran out of luck on the East Coast, you go get on the Oregon Trail and try to fucking get to Oregon. You know what I mean? Let's get out of there and do something else. You can't do that shit anymore. And when I say that, I mean problems aren't isolated. They are pretty diffused amongst the population. We have gotten so large as an institution that something like a housing crisis doesn't just affect the fucking East Coast or West Coast, it affects the entire goddamn globe now. So you can't run from these problems anymore. And people don't have any tolerance for discomfort. So if people don't have any tolerance for discomfort, the people that we elect are going to have even less, because discomfort now polls poorly. So we have to get away from that entirely. And now there are no more solutions to be had, right? There's only better and better fucking cognitive dissonance, I guess. Better and better lies.
Better and better identification of problems. And that's what you're seeing, what I brought up earlier on, that you have mostly something crazy happens on the left. The right reacts to it, calls it a problem. The left was creating a problem or identifying a problem in the first place, and then the right plays defense.
Yeah.
Right? There is no solution, forward-focused, pioneer spirit, oriented direction to this. No.
Right. And the solution to some of this stuff is, austerity sometimes. And people don't want to do that. People don't want to give up what they have. They don't want to give up. And I'm not talking about paying higher gas prices so we can send $1.5 billion to fucking Ukraine. Not into that. What I'm talking about is, you know what? Hey, we're going to fucking not have X, Y, and Z for a little while so we can save some money and better our situation. That is not what happens here anymore. People want the government to forgive their student loans, or they want to get a bailout of some sort.
I heard this recently. One of the problems, or one of the reasons that millennials are so dissatisfied is that they're the first generation that's never done better than their parents.
But is that true?
I'm not sure.
Like there have to be more sub 40 millionaires than there have ever been, right? Sometimes through no fault of their own.
But remember that you're talking about outliers there, right? You're talking about a very, very small number of people, whereas access to be able to buy a house on average is more difficult. Access to be able to blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, a lot of those things. I mean, rentership has gone up exponentially over the last 25 years. Over the last 25 years, we've also seen a 40% decrease in testosterone in men in the West. That seems like a problem.
1% a year.
1%,
just goes at 1% a year,
Since we were born, actually.
1980.
Since 1980, that's bad. That's really bad. I mean, your body compensates for shit like that. So is it a surprise that more people are identifying as confused about their fucking gender when the gamete and hormone that controls that are now no longer present the same way they were before? Of course not. I mean, it's obvious. But again, we've identified a problem with a very easy and practical solution, which is to say, maybe get rid of single-use plastics and maybe start supplementing with foods and drugs that help you maintain the appropriate amount of fucking testosterone.
Stop putting estrogen in everything, from
everything,
scented candles to soaps.
I mean, that part is another reason why I'm black-pilled. I love Hanlon's razor because I think conspiracy theories are pretty wild sometimes, but the fact that estrogen is in literally everything is, what the fuck, man? That is the real version of the concerns people had with fluoride back in the 1990s. And we just keep doing it. So, man, I don't see the larger the organization gets, the more perilous disruption becomes, right? Like the more people that are affected by the disruption.
Because there's more externalities and it's scaled up.
Yeah. And also that institution has more responsibility that's diffused over a larger part of the population. And if something happens with them, then now people are doing without. And I think that the next recession or depression or whatever it is that's coming is going to be crippling for America.
I have a friend who is very high up in finance in New York. And we were having this discussion about the boom and bust cycle and blah, blah. And he said, dude, we are way, way, way overdue on a huge pullback for everything. And I was like, no, man. Like, look at, I showed him the S&P, and I was like, look at this in 2020. And he was like, no, I'm not talking about a small pullback before the Fed injects a ton of cash and then brings everything back up. He's like, I'm talking about a sort of generation-changing problem with the financial market. And this is a very, very rational person that I trust. And I just thought, fuck.
Yeah. I mean, I saw an article the other day that there's like 150,000 new people in the stock market over the last 6 months. Interesting, right? Like there's going to be some market fluctuation from that. And as I said, the institution of the stock market, like it's been used for a very long time as a gauge for how well the economy is doing, and that's not real, right? I mean, the misery index is a lot better. The misery index is the unemployment rate plus inflation. That's a more accurate depiction of how the economy is doing. Even though now we've changed the way we define inflation and changed the way we've defined unemployment.
Changed the basket of goods that inflation was built around,
the CPI,
right?
yeah.
What's that? What's that stand for?
Our consumer price index.
Right.
So like the basket of goods that you might be able to buy for this now costs X percent more.
Yep.
We've changed the basket, right? You can make a poll say anything you want. And as far as unemployment goes, people that haven't looked for work actively over 6 weeks who aren't currently drawing unemployment, they don't count as unemployed anymore. They're out of the workforce. So when they say, we've got 3.5% unemployment, well, no, it's actually 11%.
Very, very massaged figures.
Yeah. So again, we're operating with bad data. And there's a solution. People start believing what's true and not believing what's not true. But is that going to happen in time? Will it happen in time? I don't think so. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all develops too, because there's a huge contingent of people who are already on that. Like, I like Jordan Peterson. He's very frank about what he believes, and it's good for people that he's like that. And there are people like, Rogan has a huge audience. He's I can't tell if he's black-pilled or not, to be honest. He seems hopeful.
Yeah, I would say so.
But there's, you're out there. There are a lot of people who are critical of institutions. Michael Malice is one of them. Tim Pool's one of them. Just in general, they're probably more on the anarchist side than even I am. But how many people does it take? Like what percentage of the population? 81 million people voted for Biden when he was in clear cognitive decline because they believed what they saw on the internet. Now that's fine. That's your judgment to make. But they chose marketing and propaganda over reality, in my opinion.
Well, the line's been blurred between the two. To speak for the 81 million, it's not like they were in full presence of all of the facts. That's the entire job of the corporate press. That's why Malice says corporate press are the enemy of the people. Yeah. And the other thing, he said this on my show, which really, really was a great way to remember it. He said the corporate press don't have a bias. They have an agenda.
Correct, yeah.
And that's different.
It is very different, yeah. A bias is a lens. An agenda is like, I'm going to make this happen.
Outright policy, yeah, precisely. And when you realize that, you go, well, that's why accusing any side, all Trump voters are racist, or all Biden voters are idiots.
Monoliths never work. Like a monolith it never works. No group of people is one thing, ever.
No.
It just doesn't happen. That's not how.
It's way too simplistic. And what you're accusing, for the most part, when people say that there's these 81 million idiots or this 75 million racists or whatever, what people are criticizing the other side of is not seeing the nuance of the detail, whilst using a rubric, which is not seeing the nuance of the detail.
Right. A lot of people voted because they didn't like Trump's attitude, and no amount of propagandizing was going to change that. A lot of people voted because they vote for Democrats, and there's not going to be any change in that either, right? Like I wonder, if I had to guess, I would say probably about 75, 80% of the population votes for one party or the other, regardless of what else is going on, unless something egregious happens. And that's what we see. It's like 40% registered Republicans, 43% registered Democrats in a typical year. This doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. I think we should. Not sure, but I think it would be interesting if we voted for resumes instead of personalities. You know what I mean?
Well,
that could be.
That cult of personality is largely what politics has turned into now.
Yeah.
That it very much is a likability contest. What was it that one of the reasons that Clinton was so successful, right? It was just this unbelievable communicator.
Yeah.
What was that? The first, I want to say it was JFK, or one of the first presidential debates where one person had makeup on.
Nixon. He was sweating his ass off.
Yes.
1959 or 1960 election,
right?
yeah.
And you've got this, you can't deny the rules of the game, and the rules of the game are that you need to play to human nature.
Yeah. And Kennedy, by the way, was up until that point not exactly popular because he was a Catholic, and Americans weren't. There had never been a Catholic president before that, despite Catholicism being one of the oldest religions on earth. There hadn't been up until that point a Catholic president.
It's like back in Ireland.
Well, yeah, I mean they have
Problems.
Yeah, they got a problem with that. But yeah, it's certainly turned into that cult of personality shit, and that's why I don't see the solution. Like you have to red pill people, and I don't mean red as in red state conservative. Red pill as in the fucking Matrix. You have to unplug people from this bullshit, and you can't, like any other addict, you cannot help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. Right? I think Peterson actually put out a clip about it the other day. Don't stop trying to save people that don't want to be saved. And I'm kind of there. I'm at the point now where, I mean, we do this stuff to try to be educational and at least challenge what people think. And it's not about being a contrarian. It's about showing people how to challenge the narrative, right? And find answers without jettisoning the entire thing. But I feel like jettisoning the entire thing.
I can tell.
Honest.
That's come through a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would probably caution people to be wary of is something called reflexive heterodoxy or reflexive contrarianism, which we've seen a lot of especially since COVID, right? That
yeah. I mean, fucking what's his name? Shit, keep going.
If the true narrative is wrong, or if we are not to trust what we are being told by the powers that be, therefore the opposite must be true, is just as low resolution and simplistic of a viewpoint as believing everything that you hear from mainstream media and the government.
Christopher Hitchens, that's what I was thinking of.
Correct. Which can be...
Yeah, the Hitchens Razor, yeah.
Yes.
But he also wrote this book, Letters from a Young Contrarian, and it was about how he, in university, was a total socialist, right? And how it's if you haven't read it, you should read it. It's his own essays kind of delivered in a like, I can't believe I fucking did this situation, which is a very self-aware.
Commenting on himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very self-aware thing to do.
Ask Douglas, if you get time, ask Douglas about Hitch. He has the best Hitch stories.
I'm sure.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's too. That was a big loss for. I wonder where he would be right now, because it was interesting to see how he kind of navigated the global war on terror.
Did you ever see Sam Harris's first speech after Hitch passed?
No, I don't think. Well, maybe I did. Yeah.
He just does this really sort of beautiful, heartfelt introduction about how Hitch had more charisma and creativity in his little finger than most of the people that were up on stage, including Sam Harris himself.
Yeah.
And it's so. You do think that there are people like that, and they become vectors, right, or like epicenters or tips of spear. Peterson's become one of those. I think Douglas probably will, if he's not already, will be with his new book, and Hitch was, and
his new book, the Death of Europe, or
the War on the West.
Oh, the War on the West. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
That people become, they coalesce ideas around them, right? And they become more than just being a person. They actually represent an entire mode of thinking. And I think that, you're talking about someone like Christopher Hitchens. And herein sort of lies the problem that we had about the cult of personality, because people follow people that they like. And far more people would identify with liking Jordan Peterson than liking existentialism, right?
Yeah.
With liking Douglas Murray than liking the school of conservative thought.
Right.
And with liking Christopher Hitchens than liking the ideas behind atheism. People follow people, they don't follow things. And ideas get represented by people. But the problem is, how do you then detract away from that when you want to have an election come along? You can't just switch that off. You can't switch off the proclivity that people have. And when you've got a politician that's got a Twitter and an Instagram, and you know the name of their wife, and you know the name of their dog, and you know the route that they do the whatever, like,
Right.
and they're trying to create this vision that they're a normal human with a family life and all this stuff behind the scenes, you go, well, everything becomes performance art. Everything does. And then people do that to themselves. You know, we all prostitute ourselves on the internet for varying amounts of like money or attention.
Social currency too.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, that's the money part. I can understand that. The social currency part, I don't get it. I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't. It wouldn't occur to me to say something that isn't true because of how someone else may feel about me.
It's going to make you more popular. Yeah.
Like that doesn't. I mean, there's a I'm sure a nuance to that. Like I'm not going to be intentionally hurtful most of the time, unless it's funny or something, unless I know the person can handle that type of shit. But like I don't think Sam Harris in The Moral Landscape, I believe, says that the goal should be to minimize conscious suffering and maximize conscious joy, right? Like those are the two axes of the human experience, at least. But he makes a lot of really interesting points about if you follow that natural thought process. I mean, so let's say you reduce that to let's maximize the totality of human joy or conscious joy and minimize the totality of conscious suffering. The easiest way to do that would be to kill everybody that's suffering. Then there is no more suffering, right? Technically. But obviously that's not the answer. We know that. Why we know that, I don't know. But intrinsically, human beings know that that's not the answer unless there's something fucking wrong with you. But there's still quite a few questions to be answered there.
Well, this is the problem with the alignment problem that you have in AI, if you're familiar with that. So you have a function that you want to get, an objective that you want an AI system to achieve, and if you don't get it absolutely perfectly correct with every single potential misinterpretation of it hold up,
Yeah, it goes
you
off
end up
the
with
fucking rails,
crazy externalities. So, for instance, you tell an AI that you want to make all humans on Earth happy, right? So it sticks electrodes into our face to force our muscles to retract so that we're constantly smiling.
Yeah.
Or it kills every person that's miserable.
Yep.
Or it decides to put us into vats like the Matrix and just put us on intravenous MDMA for the rest of our lives. You go, okay, look, it might be fun.
Yeah.
But that's not what we meant.
Yeah.
That's not what we meant. And this sort of more autistic view of the world, which doesn't take into account the nuance. But again, like this, all of these things have kernels of truth in them. And the fact that you can't have a very rough-hewn answer is exactly why it's difficult.
Right.
Because attention spans are decreasing.
Right.
People's preparedness to put themselves, we talked about discomfort a lot today, the discomfort of sitting with uncertainty, the discomfort of not knowing the answer and knowing that you don't know, and not wanting to just fill that gap of uncertainty with certainty that might not be accurate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the God hole. I think
God-shaped hole.
God-shaped hole, or what does Michael Shermer call it? Fuck, I can't remember. I just had him on 2 weeks ago. It's like any gap, the God gap. Yeah, like any gap, we just say, oh, that's God. Or whatever, right? Whatever God is to you. It's not always some deity or anything like that. But yeah, it's a problem. And I wonder about that. I wonder, it seems to me, just based on my experience, that modularity is probably the solution there. That's why I tend to lean so much towards liberty, because it gives, like, you build an infrastructure where people can fucking thrive, and then you give them modularity. Like, I'm able to take these parts of what you're trying to do and use them for myself and forget about those parts and blah, 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 right? So I can make it very customized to myself.
This is my most useful insight for anybody that deals with jealousy or envy around that we look at people who are successful and we treat them as one whole being, right?
Yeah.
But they're not. They're not. You look at someone and you say, Tiger Woods, right? One of the best golfers of all time, and he's come back recently, and he might be on screen right now.
Actually, I think I remember a quote from you about this. You can't take
part of someone's
individual
life.
parts.
You have to take the whole.
Yeah,
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. That's exactly the same thing that we're talking about here. you want to look at society as a design that needs to be pieced together in that sort of modular fashion. We need to do it for people. Why wouldn't we do it for society as well?
Right. I mean, if you want it for people, then it has to be society. But we've not created society like that. And that's why, again, I hate to keep harping on it, but that's why I feel very black-pilled, because I don't think I think our system of government is fucking really good. The combination of like common law, English common law, and then our case law and our constitutional law, elucidating the rights of man in a way that was attempted with the Magna Carta, but now it's come to full fruition, and we've also added some amendments to clarify that shit, I think is the best attempt at government in history. And still it doesn't scale, right? Like, it still does not scale. So maybe it's cynical of me, I don't know. But
I'm seeing a bunch of friends in Austin increasingly talk about group housing now, or I don't know whether it's not quite a commune, but, you know, like extracting themselves and 9 other families and basically creating their own little walled off community somewhere. Got a bunch of friends that are talking very, very seriously.
Yeah.
I've one buddy who is running a festival on his ranch as a trial to see how him and the other families in this potential group housing project get on with doing a big operation.
right.
I'm thinking that is a very sophisticated, like that you don't put a festival on with a group of other people for no reason at all. Like, you're doing this because you're very, very serious about moving yourself out
Well,
there.
unless you're
Especially if they've never done that before.
unless you're Ja Rule, right?
In which case you just buy up Pablo Escobar's island and go to town. Leave people in Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah,
shelters.
he's definitely putting his money where his mouth is, for lack of a better phrase, in doing that.
And then you go, and I was talking to him about it, and he's like, look, man, I really, really want, I spiritually feel drawn toward it. And I'm also very concerned about what's happening outside of it.
Right.
Grow my own food. Have my own liberty. Have people on site that can do everything that we need. There's someone on site that can do electric stuff. There's someone on site that can do doctoring stuff. There's someone on site that knows about education. You know?
Yeah.
People are recreating a society now that they feel like the modern world hasn't given to them.
Well, modern society has tried to monetize all those things, which is
Commercialize it.
Yeah, which is, you know, to some degree that's fine. Human history is the result of trying to monetize is the right word, but trying to valueize what you contribute, right? Because
Commoditize it,
yeah, commoditize it might be the right word, because it's like every major religious text says the same thing. You don't work, you don't eat, right? And that's how it used to be. You contribute something to our little fucking group or get the fuck out. And with that comes quite a bit of nuance, right? Younger people, babies can't fucking farm, and elderly people can't farm either, right? So what are we doing here? And it took on like a lot of different forms over the years, but the most valuable ones tended to value and respect the very young and the very old for what they could provide us, like hope in the future and wisdom. And like in native cultures, every older woman was called grandmother, and every older man was called grandfather, right? Everybody in the village, like every child.
Respect to the elders,
that way. But man, we've taken the worst parts of that and made it intrinsic to our culture. We have septuagenarians and octogenarians running our government, people that would be unemployable otherwise. Like, at no point would you put out a fucking job posting and be like, I only want people who are 65 to 85 years old. Can we make that happen? Of course not, right? But they do have value, but that is the story of the West. It's the commercialization. We take the idea that's worked for so long, or that's worked in certain instances, and we strip away all the things that make it work and hold on to the things that make the people that hold it powerful, right? It's a big problem. And I don't know how you reverse it unless people understand that that's what's happening. Now, we can tell them. James Lindsay tries to tell people all the time, like, dude, stop fucking believing this shit. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. People are like, oh, you're a far-right activist. He's like, no, don't vote Republican.
I learned the other day about the ancient Greek word for work. So the ancient Greek word for work meant not at leisure. What does that tell us?
So leisure is the baseline.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. You're not living to work. Work is the abhorrent outlier in your life. And whereas now, whether by necessity, economic, financial necessity to provide for yourself and your family, or existential necessity to feel validated by the world, most people live to work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the organized labor used to say 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, and 8 hours for what you will, I believe was their quote. That still seems like a lot of work. 8 hours. A third of your life you're supposed to work. I mean, we moralize things like that, right? So we talked about this the other day too. All of public education is designed to create obedient workers. And we also moralize work. You know what I mean?
It's noble.
It's noble to go. It's what's noble is to provide for your family. What's not noble is to be a cog in a machine that is grinding you into fucking paste.
Well, also, you very quickly get distracted. People forget, and deliberateness and intentionality are two of the words that have come up in a lot of conversations I have. I have a lot of discussions around sort of goal setting and productivity on my show. Deliberateness and intentionality. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Like, what's the purpose? Genuinely, what is the purpose? Gary Vee got brought up as this example, and I hadn't seen the interview, but someone was telling me that he'd been in this interview and was saying what he's working so hard for is to leave a legacy for his children, you know, so that his children have got $1 billion to play with. Now, one of the prices that he needed to pay for that was that daddy wasn't going to be home for most weekends throughout all of their childhood.
Right.
And I'm like, bro, if you give 2-year-old Chris Williamson the choice between daddy being home for every weekend or $1 billion when he's 18 years old, but the $1 billion comes with all of the developmental problems that he's accumulated from daddy never being home. Like, dude, I want my dad home.
Yeah, it's almost like that trope. We spend our youth creating wealth, and then we spend our wealth trying to buy back our youth. Right? That's the hallmark of Western society now.
Peterson nailed this on my show. He said, the single biggest predictor of wealth is age. Do you want to be young and poor or old and rich?
Right.
Because you can't buy youth.
Right, yeah. You can, I mean, the only, I guess the only commodity we have that's irreplaceable is time, right? Unless somebody fucking creates an Einstein-Rosen bridge. But even then, you're not like making yourself younger. You're just traveling backwards in time. You're still the same age. Maybe NAD. That seems like it's got some promise.
Fuck about with your telomeres a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's
rapamycin in you.
but even, I don't get it. I don't understand that. Like, I understand sacrificing to create a better life, right? Pain, time, sometimes money, whatever, comfort. But especially if you have kids, that doesn't make sense.
Well, young guys, so I had this throughout my 20s, that I attached my sense of self-worth to my success in my business, right? I'm running these club nights, I'm on the front door, it's very personal to me. And a lot of young guys and girls probably who start their own businesses or just find a degree of success in something when they're young. They started, the difference between them and what they do kind of starts to dissolve a little bit, and they are their work, they are their success. And then what you can do, that Puritan work ethic, right, the priests hoeing the garden, you can take pleasure in the work itself, even though you hate it, or even though it's hard, or even though it doesn't contribute to your broader long-term goals, because you have been told, you've been given this narrative that you're supposed to work hard, and that there's something noble inside of it. And you go, yeah, but in service of what?
Yeah.
What's this in service of? What's the point? And this is something else I'm really, really big on. There is no narrative for people who have got enough now, right? Let's say that 100 grand a year is absolutely everything financially that you need to live.
Right.
If you earn 100 grand a year, there is not a single person that is pushing a narrative of not saying, turn that into 200 or turn that into 500.
Right, yeah.
All that money is leverage to be able to create more money now.
Right, yeah.
And for me, I think if you're able to be happy at that, and the guy that's next to you can't be happy until he's at $1 million, you've got a 10x competitive advantage.
Yeah.
You should see your low materialism set point as an outright advantage to you.
Certainly, yeah.
And lean into it and go, look, dude, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. I've got myself to the stage where this is easy or passive or I'm scaled up or whatever.
It doesn't just go back to the Greek view of work with leisure as the baseline. Because it is true that money, more than anything else, can buy you time.
Yep.
Like that's absolutely true. Like the more money I have, the less I have to do shit to make more money, right? I mean, that's how it is. But it also buys you the freedom to tell people to go fuck themselves. And I don't mean, like just walk down the street and yeah, fuck you. I mean,
You don't need that?
no,
I kind of get the impression that you might do something.
I do road rage because I think it's funny, honestly. Like I work on.
Well, there's a guy who carries as well. That's
It's not that kind of road rage. I like work on one-liners and crack myself up all the time. Like I try to very quickly identify who the person is and insult them in a way, or their behavior, right? It's just a mental acuity thing, I guess.
That's why you need the word wanker more.
Oh,
in
yeah.
America.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we don't have a word for somebody who just fucking jacks off all the time. I guess neckbeard or incel, but those...
Wanker. You need...
Wanker is a good one, yeah.
It's like, I would love to see the uses of wanker, and I'm pretty sure that road rage is like...
Oh, it's got to be right at
one
the
of
top,
the
yeah.
one of the highest ones.
Yeah, but the point is, yeah, somebody says something or creates something, some institution that is disagreeable. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to say, I'm not going to get involved in that because they need that.
Correct.
Right? Having wealth makes you powerful in a way that you can say no, but also that you can tell other people to say no. For example, if there is a short-form blog style social media apparatus that's engaged in quite a bit of censorship, particularly towards one side of the political aisle. Fuckery, yeah. And you're, let's say, I don't know, a billionaire that owns electric cars and shit like that, and you decide, I've had enough of this. Now you can do something about it. That's power. That's real power, in my opinion. And leveraged appropriately as well, right? Which is a big deal.
Even on a smaller scale, right? The normal every guy's scale, wealth is the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, and no one gets to tell you otherwise.
Yeah, and that's really good for the market too, because the market then gets set organically by people who are making decisions.
As opposed to by necessity.
Yes. As opposed to by edict, I guess would be more appropriate, right? Because if the people in power are trying to shape what you're doing, typically it's for their cause, not yours, not for your own good. I mean, think about the medical advice we all got in the middle of 20th century. Like, you got to stop eating so much fat. Here's corn syrup and fucking carbs. Like, oh,
Make sure that you eat 3 meals a day.
Yeah. Or a 5, right? Like, at what point in human history did we just cruise around eating 5 meals a day? But that was real, like from the early 2000s, like 2002, 3 through the mid-teens. It was like, I eat 5 small meals a day, keeps my body energized. Like, no, it doesn't. You're dying. You're literally dying. Stop
quicker.
eating grain. But on the other end, the keto stuff too has gotten a little out of control.
Well, everybody decides to attach an ideology to whatever it is that they're into, right? And again, this is that God-shaped hole thing, right? You know, maybe the thing that you're adamant is the reason for your existential crisis in life is identity politics, or it's transphobes, or it's meat eaters, or it's fucking gluten, or whatever, right? People want to try and find the villain and point the finger at them.
Yeah, that's we do that with the things that we consider valuable, and that's the problem that I'm having. Is I don't value the same shit that other people do, and I see it as very detrimental that people value the things they do, like popularity and there's some degree of social acceptance that is a part of the formula that turns you into a good person, right? Because negative behavior, getting a negative response, that's appropriate. It should happen that way. But when your entire identity hinges on that, now you're in trouble, right?
Again, kernel of truth in it. We can't deny that there is an amount of prestige and social status that makes us feel like we belong,
right?
That makes us feel proud of the things that we've done. We're social animals. The point of Peterson again, right? Dominance hierarchy, competence hierarchy. The lobster at the top stands up more straight, got more serotonin, right? The same system, 350 million years, it's as old as trees, right? That is something that we can't get away from. What happens when you commoditize, commercialize, weaponize that? When you turn it up to 11?
Yeah.
What happens? Then it gets completely molested.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember a point in human history. Like I try to think of like the Great Awakening and shit like that, where the period of religion having complete control of science went away, right? Like we may have colonized the entire solar system by now, if not for that bullshit. Who knows? But I think of that. And then I think of the Great Awakening until now, where religion has still got a pretty strong hold on a lot of this stuff. Or, it's still, people found a way to politicize science outside of religion even, right? Things that have nothing to do with your maybe your eternal belief system, if you want to call it that, but just stuff that's moralized now. And the effect was the same. It removed the meritocracy element out of the science entirely. And it was an agenda-based situation, the same way that the Catholic Church did for years, and many others, not just them. So I haven't seen an example in human history of an institution controlling thought like that evaporated entirely. You know what I mean? So Thomas Paine, Rights of Man, super important. A lot of the books of the founding, a lot of the works of the founding fathers, and then a lot of the English common law writers as well, thought leaders. Even I know as an Englishman this hurts, but a lot of French people writing about democracy and shit. I know, fuck them, but they did do some democratic shit. A lot of those thought leaders produced this grand idea that in the 18th century seemed great, and it didn't last very long, unmolested. So I'm not sure how to, you're talking about manipulating human behavior, right? But you don't want to be the kind of person that wants to manipulate human behavior. So I don't know how to do that other than just teaching people how to think and teaching people that it's okay to challenge things, whether you're right or wrong, right? It's not about, you can't get emotionally invested in having the right answer. Or I'm sorry, in being the person that gave the right answer. Like pride of authorship is not good. Having the right answer is important. Being the person that discovered it, less important, right? I don't know how to communicate that to people in a way that's going to fucking resonate with them and where they can shed this pathological desire for social acceptance.
Well, not if you're playing by the rules that you've just said that you are. One of the problems is you've got asymmetric warfare going on.
Right.
If the other side is prepared to use every cognitive limbic hijack trick in the book, and you decide to say, well, I have some lines that I don't want to cross. I'm happy to inform but not manipulate.
Right.
I'm happy to convince but not coerce. Right. If you're prepared to do that, and the other side isn't, you go, okay, well, who's going to win?
Right.
Not the person with the best information. It's the person who's got the best tactics.
So what do you do?
Well, it's difficult. This is where legislation actually is useful, right? Because you need to mandate this back down. Because people are going to go toward, why is it that smoking information on cigarettes, right? Smoking, although I'm not a smoker, is...
people that haven't traveled to Europe don't know the full... the full range of that, because in a lot of European countries, it just says smoking kills on the front.
Dude,
or something
in Spain, fuck you. We're smoking in bed. We're smoking all day. Go into Madrid or the streets of a Canary Island in the Mediterranean, and you're going to see, it's not in the Mediterranean. You're going to see Balearics. People outside of a restaurant at 10 p.m. sitting down for dinner. Chain smoking.
Yeah.
Outside, wrought iron, lovely, beautiful Venetian blinds above, or some open windows. Someone's playing a mandolin over the far side. Chain smoking all night. They don't give a fuck. That's just the way. And I think I said this to you last week about the expectation effect, that people in France eat objectively worse than people in America. It's called the French diet effect, right? So people in France eat objectively better. but the information and the lifestyle and the beliefs that they have around their food are completely different. It's just, look, I'm going to have a baguette that's drizzled in olive oil and butter, and I'm going to have myself some patisseries endlessly and smoke a cigarette.
There's an old French saying, a French culinary saying, if you're going to use cream, why not just use butter? Yeah.
I've got some friends that like to party that do something similar to that, I think.
It's like, come on, man. I'm not trying to completely lubricate this. I can chew it up and stuff.
Yeah.
It's fine, yeah. But yeah, that's really interesting. And then in England, like if the front of a pack of cigarettes says "smoking kills," right, or something like that.
Oh, it's big. It's a big boy.
Or it's like a big skull and crossbones or something.
Yeah, I mean,
it depends.
In the UK, they've got the images of arteries that look like fat's coming out of them. I mean, it's pretty graphic. They've, as far as I could see, again, it's easy to say it would have worked on me as someone that didn't have the addiction, right, or the compulsion.
Yeah.
But I think that the anti-smoking legislation and the way that that's been implemented is pretty fucking effective.
Well, making it inconvenient for people certainly
going
is effective.
outside. Yeah.
Like making something inconvenient for people is probably the most effective way to get something done. But then again, making it inconvenient for somebody to go to a restaurant or buy groceries or travel because they didn't get vaccinated, for example. Now you're giving the same, like whatever power you give the government, you give it to them. That is the problem with most, like the sign of a good piece of legislation is that it's clear, concise, and enforceable. Like clear in its intent, concise, and that it only applies to the very narrow thing that it should apply to, and enforceable in a way that there's actually teeth to it, right? Those are the three elements of good legislation. And like we're talking theoretical about, legislation could be good sometimes, but that's not how it works here. Not in America. We pass omnibus bills that have all kinds of stupid bullshit in them. Canada just passed one, just some random bill, and it's got like another $100 million for vaccinations. That, like, what the fuck? You don't need that shit anymore.
Snuck in the footnotes.
Yeah, like, what the fuck, man? And it's not all about vaccines and shit. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that I'm looking for a real solution to this. One that doesn't necessarily involve relying on the government, because I don't think you can rely on the government. One of the things that I like to tell people is that your job as somebody who values liberty is to make liberty more of a reality for other people, right? Like if you can turn your pain and suffering into empathy for others, you can save both of your lives, typically, is something that I tell people a lot. If you can find ways to box out the government, so your neighbor down the street has a problem, instead of having to rely on a government, an institution that is intrinsically corruptible and likely corruptible as well, if you can just solve that problem for them, then the problem ends right there. It's low-level conflict resolution. It doesn't just have to be conflict between the two of us. It could be conflict between you and somebody else, you and nature, you and existence. And if I can help you resolve that at the lowest possible level, then we mitigate the opportunity for fucking corrupt power to take advantage of us collectively.
I've come to the same realization, but from a little bit of a different angle. So the fact that if there is something that you go through in life, some sort of trauma, some sort of difficulty, some sort of challenge that's really, really hurt you, one of the best ways to transcend that is to use the things that you learned to then go and help other people.
I mean, you see it all the time.
To get past something.
Like survivors of addiction and rape are the best people at communicating with people who are, it reminds me of this, you ever watch that show, The West Wing?
Very, very briefly.
If you want to learn completely how American government doesn't work, and a liberal fantasy of how government works, then watch that show. But yeah, it's there's a story that the chief of staff tells to somebody else. I think it was the vice president, maybe, or no, it was it's Bradley, whatever. Anyways, the story goes as follows: man falls down a well. Somebody from the government walks by, and he's like, hey, can you help me out? And he goes, sure, I'll go pass a bill that outlaws this. Priest walks by, he's like, hey, Father, can you help me out? He goes, sure, and he says a prayer and walks on. Doctor walks by, he's like, hey, Doc, can you help me? writes a prescription, throws it down in the well. He's like, man, this sucks, right? Then his buddy walks by, and he says, hey, I'm trapped. Can you fucking help me? And his buddy jumps down in the hole. And he's like, what are you doing now? We're both stuck here. And he goes, yeah, but I've been here before, and I know the way out. And that's one of the more profound ways to tell that particular story, right, that I've ever heard. That hit me. I think I saw that in like 2002, and it's stuck with me ever since. And it's just that story has shaped how I think about a lot of things, right? About how I think about processing emotion, excuse me, personally, when things piss me off, right? Even in my personal relationships, you're going to get mad sometimes. Why did the person do the thing that they did that made me mad? And what does it look like from their perspective? You know what I mean? I think that's it's steel manning the other person's argument, basically. But doing so when you're angry is not the easiest thing. It's a fun challenge.
Also realizing that people are just the accumulation of all of the different experiences and life events that they have, right? This is Sam Harris's argument around free will and determinism. He talks about Uday Hussein, Saddam Hussein's son, and you think, okay,
who else could he have become?
Precisely.
Yeah.
You've got 2-year-old Uday, I think it is.
Uday, yeah.
Yeah, Uday. You've got the 2-year-old.
He was the one that was torturing all the Olympic Village people.
Correct. Yeah, he's fucked up. One of the most heinous humans that's ever lived on the planet.
Yeah.
You think you're 2 years old, right? And you've got this father, those genetics, this environment. You roll the clock forward. You're 7-year-old, and you're in school, and you're bullying the other kids, and maybe you're kicking animals or pulling the flies, the wings off of flies or something. And then you roll forward, and you're 12 years old, and you're starting to become a man. You're in this honor culture, and there's these expectations of you. And just continue to tick the clock forward one day after a day after a day. And then you're torturing people that have been to an Olympic Village. You go, well, who else could he have become?
Yeah.
And this is the problem as well, to talk about the criminal justice system. You have one which is predicated on retribution, not on rehabilitation.
Right.
And what you do is
we've never even attempted rehabilitation. Certain countries have, in Northern Europe especially, like Sweden and shit like that. But the West in general has never taken a rehabilitation-first approach to criminal justice. Never. Maybe it's because of religion or something. I honestly don't know. Maybe it's just because people are angry and revenge is easier than rehabilitation. I don't know. But you're right about that.
It's not about redemption.
No.
It's not about, and what you do is you create essentially a university for criminals where if you made some minor transgression, you're now thrown in with people who have done much worse than you.
Right.
And they're going to teach you or influence you in a way, again, that limbic hijack that we were talking about. Oh, well, when you get out, you're going to struggle to get a proper job.
Yeah. Which is true, by the way.
Yeah.
Like it happens, that piece of propaganda happens to be true. So they get out and it's immediately reinforced. That's a core belief for them at that point moving forward. And we do nothing to, I mean, look, I'm not saying that we should take it easy on crime. That's not the point here. The point is that the byproduct of our current process is fucked up. So, I mean, what do you want to do? You want to just fucking kill these people and be done with it? Because we can reintroduce people into society that have been trained to do what you said, right? Which is to be career criminals. We can do that because it's the right thing to do to punish them, but it's also the right thing to do to let them go at some point. But there's a third element there, right? Like these people have to be reintegrated into society in some way. It's the same mistake we made with post-traumatic stress and military people. We did nothing to reintegrate these people back into society. Like my last deployment on Sunday, I was driving around Baghdad, fucking people up, or southeast of Baghdad, fucking people up. And Wednesday, I was driving a car around in North Carolina, right? Not good, because that was a point in my life when road rage was a bit more of a problem. You know what I mean? Like actively looking for somebody to fight. You know what I mean? And the parallels are not the same. I'm not saying that soldiering is the same as being a criminal. But when you add all those elements, like taking away your agency, for example, and war does that. Like you have to do certain things to stay alive sometimes, things that you may find morally reprehensible. And I assume that prison is probably similar in a lot of ways. And then you add all these other elements, people that don't understand. Like I'm trying to explain to you, like you're thanking me for my service, and I'm trying to tell you I need fucking help. You know what I mean? So even when the communication is honorable between the two people, it doesn't work. So why should we expect it to work when it's somebody that has done stupid shit and now has to go reintegrate? It just doesn't work that way. And we've done nothing to fucking try to, I mean, individuals, some small organizations have tried, but the institution itself has never even tried. As a matter of fact, there's over a dozen states in the United States that have contracts with private prisons, and they are required to keep a certain number of beds filled in those private prisons. Otherwise, the state owes that corporation money.
Like a hotel occupancy, right?
Yeah. That is a real thing. California does that, actually. Great liberal California. They have a number of private prisons that have bed requirements. Arizona's one. So it's red states. Well, I guess Arizona's a blue state this year. But, yeah. It's not, again, this is another one of those existential issues for our country that is portrayed as partisan and isn't in any way. Everybody is a piece of shit involved in that. And again, blackpilled. I don't see it. I don't see how we fucking, other than building these small communities and working on increasingly lower level conflict resolution. But it's the same with anything else. If you're a fucking athlete, if you're a cricket player, right, and you're not making good contact, or you're a bowler and you're not, like your pitches aren't going well, you go back to the basics, right? You relearn your fundamentals. And I think that's what we have to do as a society. I see a lot of people like homesteading and shit like that. Maybe that's a little bit too far, because that's good for you, but is it good for everybody else?
Do you think that there is a responsibility of the individual to the collective outside of their immediate family?
Yes. I think you're responsible for anything that benefits you. Right?
What do you mean?
So roads, for example. Like I'm not a libertarian. I think their ideas on economics are a little, frankly, they're kind of pedantic. But I don't like to have my money taken from me by force and then spent on things that I find morally reprehensible, right? That's fucked up. But roads, okay, cool. Send me a bill, and we'll figure out how much the roads actually cost, and we'll pay that amount instead of giving you more and you using the extra money however you feel like it. But I benefit from that. That's what Obama meant when he said you didn't build that back in the day. Everybody gave him a lot of shit. It was ineloquent for sure, especially from a man who typically was eloquent, so I understand why he got lit up for it. But what he meant was the infrastructure of community is what allows a lot of this stuff to happen, and that's absolutely true. It's true that that is the case. But that doesn't give you the right to tell me what to do. That gives me the responsibility to do the right thing. That's not the same. And we don't see the difference here. Like, people have resigned themselves to believe that if I'm going to take part in this stuff, then I just have to suck that dick. It's got to do it. But I think the appropriate response is to do things that strengthen the part of the institution that matters. So what we now know, speaking of the crime thing, for decades, for a couple hundred years, studies in criminology suggested that poverty was the #1 predictor of crime. In America now, particularly among people under 30, fatherless homes are the #1 predictor of crime. So how do you address that? We can't create fathers out of nowhere. We can't force irresponsible people to be responsible. You can't do that. Like, you can incentivize it to some degree. You can penalize not doing it, but you can't force the behavior to happen. So you're an adult male in a community, and you go fucking coach a Little League team. Go coach a fucking Pop Warner football. Do something, right? You can do something. So yeah, I mean, certainly you've got a responsibility to do shit like that. Not only do you have a responsibility to do it, but you can, like, the effects of that are immediate and apparent. And it also stops a lot of the shit from happening that you don't want to happen. Like, public school teachers aren't now indoctrinating your kids. If your kids have been, when I say your kids, I mean the kids in your community, not just your kids. they're no longer able to do that if you've instilled a critical Socratic mind in that child, one where they know they can come ask you questions if they have them. And if they don't have that, they're going to believe whatever the fuck they're told, or they're going to believe nothing that they're told, which is just as bad, right? We're either creating fucking idiots or cynics, and neither of those is a good solution.
People use cynicism. I've seen this increasingly recently. The use of cynicism as a proxy for being smart.
Yeah, it is.
Just because you're cynical,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you're smart. It comes across like smarts. It seems similar to smart because it's cynical and skeptic, not a million miles apart from each other.
No, I mean, Michael Shermer is probably the number one skeptic, right? That's his whole job, is to be a skeptic. He's a science historian, which is a weird job to have, I guess. I mean, somebody's got to catalog all that shit, I guess. But he's, and he will admit this as well. He's right a lot and he's wrong a lot. But he doesn't take it personally either way. And I think cynical people take it personally. And I understand it. I mean, you get lied to as much as we lie to people these days. How can you believe anything? Like, it's an act of faith to believe what another human being tells you unless they can prove it in some way. And the way we develop faith, I love Harris's work on this, by the way. The way we develop faith is either blind, which is not great, or we use the Socratic method to determine that this is it's a cost-benefit analysis. That's all it is. Like, this is probably true. And here's some corroborating evidence to that effect, right? My dad has been historically abusive. There's no reason to value that relationship. That's a smart thing to do. Or my mother or this person I know, this mentor, has always given me good advice, and they've done so without an agenda. So when they tell me something, yeah, I'm going to go check it out, but I can start from a position of this is probably true. And it gives you a head start on things, right? You don't have to go back to zero on every single thing. It's an important part of being a human being, and cynicism destroys that. Like, you go back to zero on every single thing, and if you have to go from 0 to belief, 0 to 10 on every single issue, you're never going to believe anything. Like, you're not going to be able to develop a personality. Your personality becomes contrarianism, and you're just a cunt at that point, right? I mean, it's the easy way out. It's like suicide.
People see that.
That's what it is. It's social suicide, I think.
I would agree. I mean, who wants to be around that cynic? You know,
Man. It's funny for a while, but then it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ.
That's something that's kind of weird in popular media a little bit, because the cynic I don't know whether you've watched Succession.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Roman is kind of a little bit like the trickster cynic.
He's the sneaky fucker.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's an element of cynicism in him, right? And in that, there's something kind of romantic and sort of cool and playful and tricky. And I do wonder...
It's like you're too cool for everything,
yes,
right? Like,
precisely.
I don't get involved in the mere mortals
Precisely,
bullshit.
yeah. How the problem being that person is fucking really, really entertaining to watch on a screen.
Yeah.
Piece of shit friend to have.
They
I
also
want to be friends with him.
That person also has no real influence over anything in their life, right? Like, if you educating yourself on something and then taking a firm stand on it gives you power, right, to shape the things around you. And it's an important thing. It's why ignorance is so dangerous, because you can be manipulated so easily. And there are always going to be people and groups who are trying to manipulate you, and most of the time they're going to be bad actors, right? Because that's what bad actors do. Some people do it, the noble lie stuff, but even that is like, I mean, we're seeing that now. The noble lie used to be, you know, I used to have a little bit more tolerance for that sort of thing back in the day, like telling kids, like, hey, everything's going to be okay, buddy. Don't worry. And there's some of that that's still true, but the way that's been weaponized now, like rules for thee, not for me situation, right? It's really just become a tool of the patrician class to box everybody else out. And that's why I'm still doing this, still hanging on by a thread and not completely black-pilled, because I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be the kind of well, one, I'm not going to leave other people behind. I'm not just going to leave because everything's fucked up, because what does that make me? You know what I mean?
But that's the responsibility to other people
Yeah.
that we spoke about earlier on.
I can't do it. I've tried, and it's easy. It really is easy to, especially for me. I don't give a fuck about human interaction. I could go fucking weeks without talking to another person, but that's not the right thing to do. And you have to, at some point, you have to decide how you're going to handle challenges, right? Are you going to overreact, rage, or like manic depressive or rage or something like that? Or somebody tells you something that you disagree with. Are you going to try to discover if you disagree with it or not? When things get hard, you're going to leave. And when you leave, are you taking other people with you, or are you just going by yourself? And I don't know. I think there's something innate in our character that makes us want to stay, and it takes effort to get rid of that for a lot of people, right? So every time you choose to do the right thing, it gets easier, and the same is true for doing the wrong thing. Like any other muscle, right? Or any other skill or trait. And I just can't figure out, like, I know that I need to be engaged, but I to the paradigm you mentioned before, I'm not going to fucking manipulate people. It's just not going to happen. Like, if I feel like if our society or the human race in general has to be manipulated like that to do the right thing, then it doesn't deserve to exist in the first place, right? It's irredeemable. So I'm not going to do that, because I think that would also be a cynical view. I think it's very cynical to tell people to trust me, do what I say, and not give people the fucking tools to make their own decisions. I think that's a form of cynicism as well. And I think it's far more dangerous than just, like, than just being a dick and you know, retracting from society. Like, getting involved more in society to try to fucking determine what other people do by force, by mandate, is a big problem.
Well, there's heroism in hope as well, remember. You know, a lot of people see heroism in the person, the ascetic that fucks off to the woods and looks after him and his family and stuff like that. And you go, well, okay, well, who's carrying the bigger burden? Who's shouldering the bigger weight here? You go, well, you might say, well, fuck them. I don't owe the rest of the world anything. And you go, okay, well, and that doesn't seem like a particularly noble position to take to me. It doesn't seem like a particularly heroic story for me. Like, a heroic story is to take the traumas and the difficulties and the things that you have and help bring other people up as well. Right.
But I can tell you, your buddy who's going to throw this event, it works at a small level. And the bigger it gets, the bigger problem it gets for the establishment, whatever it happens to be, local government, state government, or belief systems that are getting challenged, whatever it happens to be. And people get wild when you do that. Like the Branch Davidian.
What was that?
In Waco, Texas. There was this guy, David Koresh, he thought he was Jesus or some shit.
Was he?
No.
Oh,
well, maybe. I don't fucking know. It was a bit of a cult. And although none of the people involved ever, like, there was no evidence of child abuse, that's what they used to go deal with that situation. There's women and children being held captive at this Branch Davidian. And most of the propaganda came after the fact, after they burned the building down with all those people inside of it, right? How many people died at the Branch Davidian, Bob? Probably like 100.
76.
76.
When was this?
1994, maybe?
Fuck.
93, yeah. So you've heard of the Oklahoma City bombing?
Yes.
He did that in response to the Branch Davidian and to Ruby Ridge, a couple of other standoffs with the ATF. Or at least that's what he said. Now, that doesn't make what he did okay. He killed women and children as well. But the federal government decided that this guy who was doing something that they didn't like was a danger. Not just, and you can read the internal memos, it wasn't that he was a danger to the women and children in there. It's a danger to good order and discipline or something like that. And they burned the building down around him. So you're not just fighting human nature, you're fighting power in general. And that's why, like, people ask a lot about if you have such a big problem with the way things are going, why don't you run for office or something like that? Like, come on, man. That's a pretty naive viewpoint, in my opinion. Like, there's 438 people in Congress and another 100 senators, I think.
You could be one of them.
And
yes,
those people can't get fuck all done and never have been able to. It is all a big charade, right, with those guys. And there's, unless you were able to get similarly minded people, and I mean people like Michael Schellenberger, who's running for governor of California now, and God fucking hope he wins. You know what I mean?
well, we thought that we had that with Larry Elder.
Yeah, well,
Right.
he's kind of a. I think that guy was a little daft in your parlance.
Yeah,
but
good word.
I'm not sure he was really up to it. Michael Schellenberger is one of the smartest human beings I've ever spoken to.
Serious human.
Yeah, he is. You're familiar with his work, right?
Yeah,
San Francisco and all that stuff.
Yeah.
He is a liberal, and I don't just mean classical liberal, but there are some hints of progressivism in his ideology as well. But he's a very reasonable human being, and he sees facts for what they are. He just happens to have different solutions to problems that I might give, but if I went to him with a potential solution, he would measure that based on its merit and not based on its source or its ideological impact, right? And that's people like that. You replace the 538 with that, then you can do something maybe.
Remember what we were saying about asymmetric warfare earlier on, though. If Schellenberg is going to come in and not play the ideological games, he's not going to pick things that he knows are going to immediately be seductive to his side.
Right.
That puts him at a disadvantage.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always going to be at a disadvantage if you're not willing to fucking cheat.
To play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I understand your reticence or disposition around thinking that's a really stupid, simplistic answer to say, why don't you just run for office?
Right.
So what you're saying is, I have a problem with the system, and what I'm going to do is perpetuate the system and play by their games in an effort to try and fix it.
Yeah.
It's obviously not going to work.
I've seen it happen quite a few times. People that go to Washington with the noblest of intentions who immediately get corrupted. I mean, think about AOC, for example. It's such an interesting thing. Like, she's done some stupid shit at the local level. All the hell she rose about that Amazon factory up there, effectively what she did was get about 100,000 per year salaries removed from her fucking neighborhood. That was the end result of that, right? Which is, I guess, yeah, fuck Amazon. Why not? But you just took food out of the mouths of people, and you shortly thereafter saw a mass exodus away, right? Like, she is, as much as COVID and the real estate market there is responsible for people leaving that area. But every single time it comes down to a vote, she's on the establishment side. Every time. Every single time. So if somebody that radical can be captured so quickly by the establishment just because they want to stay in power, I'm not sure. Like, you see people like Thomas Massey or Hawley from Missouri. There's a couple of outliers, but what's 2 out of 538? You know what I mean? Like, you would need an actual movement of some sort, and it can't be violent either. because people don't respond to that. Violent overthrows don't last ever.
And it needs to be coordinated because
Yeah.
you can't do it piecemeal.
No.
You can't do it bit by bit because the defectors or the people that have come in with the alternative points of view are very quickly going to be outnumbered by the ones that don't.
Right. I mean, we've seen it quite a few times. There have been smaller movements. 2018 members of the Squad are getting elected. 2010, after Obama's first election, the Tea Party people get elected. Most of them are gone now. I think there's one left. Yeah, this doesn't work like that.
What happened to the Tea Party?
They became the firebrand for Trump. It's the
Okay.
same group. The smaller parts, the really super the super MAGA people. They are mostly Tea Partiers. Like they're just disenfranchised. I mean, the Tea Party was just like, we don't. The system is fucked. So we're gonna wear tri-corner hats, I guess. I don't know. They didn't really have a plan. Like, tear it all down is not a plan. It's just like sleeping in Zuccotti Park for 6 months. That's not. You didn't do anything. You just slept outdoors. That's not protesting. Like the point of the protest is to get something done, right? So I'm not sure what the solutions are, and it's getting increasingly more aggravating to me that many of us are essentially making a living and identifying a problem that we can't figure out how to solve. And you're doing a good job of elucidating stuff at the personal level. Peterson also at the personal level. When it comes to parenting and stuff like that, Brett Weinstein and Heather Haying are doing a great job on stuff like that. Jonathan Haidt, Greg Lukianoff do a great job on that. A lot of thought leaders out there. But as far as government goes, I don't hear anybody saying anything that could fix the fucking problems that we're in right now.
I think the problem is that coordination impact that we're talking about, right? You know, there are so many, and I'm not sure it's just government. I think it's anything when you start to scale it up to such a big, you know, what are we going to do about the prison system?
How do you get consensus among a bunch of, especially amongst a bunch of like borderline cynical free thinkers? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's tough. That might be the problem of our generation.
Well, think about it now as well, that you have this increase in a lack of hope, right? You know, that if there was ever a time to convert cynics, it's not during a time when trust in the media organizations that give us our information is at an all-time low. Trust in the competence and the faith of goodwill in the people that are in power is at an all-time low. You've got internal challenges between groups. You have intersecting ideologies that sometimes coalesce and sometimes fight against each other. You've got distrust of the people that keep us safe.
Yeah.
The police.
Yep.
Fire service.
And from both sides, it's not just a liberal versus police issue anymore. After a lot of the COVID stuff, there's quite a few conservatives that are like not really thrilled about the way you were enforcing this bullshit. You know what I mean?
Turn America into Europe, man. Fuck it. Secession. Everyone gets to just go for themselves. Hawaii's sweet. Texas is sweet. Go for it.
I would prefer that. I mean, we know this from an electoral democracy, a democratic republic that, and this is just a matter of data as well. You have the most impact at the lowest possible level. In Austin, I'm one of 1 million people. In the United States, I'm one of 330 million people. That's just basic math, right? In my small community, I'm one of maybe 10,000. Maybe less if you're from a small area, right? That's federalism. We did that on purpose. Like, that's the way we set this whole thing up, is what you're talking about. Like, we set this up so that the 9th and 10th Amendment to the Constitution basically say that anything not covered in Amendments 1 through 8 goes back to state government. That's what they say, both in commerce and in social policy, basically. But that's not how we operate. And I'm not sure, like I say, Texas should secede, and I believe that wholeheartedly, but I have no idea what that would even look like. You know what I mean? Like the entirety of the United States government would come to bear against that idea, and as it did in the Civil War, right?
The nation of Texas.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty dope, wouldn't it?
Fucking cool. You've got the flag. You've got a flag that crushes.
Yeah, I mean, the flag is basically part of the American flag. So the Texas flag is that star in the bottom right corner and the red and blue stripe.
Oh, fuck. I never realized that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's symbolic? What do you think that means?
It's the good part. It's the middle, right? I don't know. Texas does some dumb shit too. Everybody does. But I just think smaller groups work better. That's it. I mean, that's maybe that is conservatism. I don't know. But it seems pretty fucking obvious.
An interesting question that a lot of people are obviously thinking at the moment is, when do you admit that trying to coordinate a country the size of a continent is too difficult unless you want to go totalitarian dictatorship?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem, right? Like government scales, sure, if you're willing to do certain things, and it becomes a problem of mission creep. Like if the goal becomes to control the problems of the population instead of to empower the population, then you will eventually arrive at authoritarianism. You have to. There's no other pathway to get there. It's like a social tourniquet, you know what I mean? Like you have to take the fucking guesswork out of it. That's why China has 28 million people locked down right now in an area that produces a lot of our shit. So a month from now, we're going to see increased prices on pretty much everything.
Did you see the video of that drone going around?
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking Black Mirror, dude. We're going to have fucking Boston Dynamics docs chasing us down the street, scanning a fucking barcode on our hand. Did you get your next shot? Like, all right, bro. But it's, you know, I'm ready to fight. And I'm fine with that too. But most people aren't. And they're also not fine with that. So I'm not going to force. I don't think it's appropriate when I say I mean, this part of the movement can't force that. A lot of people are like, oh, we need to go to fucking war. And you do need to be ready to fight. But it's hard to know. Let's say you and I are 12 on the playground and there's some alpha shit going on. We're trying to figure out who's dominant, whether we know it or not. We're talking a little shit, or maybe we have a disagreement. It's hard to know when to actually start a physical confrontation. It's hard to know when to escalate it from discussion and even strategic shit to actual violence. And it seems like the government is kind of intent on pushing people to their limit. And I can't tell if it's just like gaslighting or if it's just happening because that's the way things happen. You know what I mean? I
would tend to lean toward it just being an externality. I don't think that it's coordinated.
It doesn't seem to be, right? Like some stuff does, but some stuff just seems like it's happening because that's what happens when shit gets this big. It's like water spilling over the top.
Do you watch Don't Look Up? That Netflix thing?
Yeah.
So in that, Kate Dibiaski, her character has this fucking amazing quote. And they're talking about the fact that there's accusations that the government has coordinated this for somehow to control the population and blah, blah. And she turns and she says, the truth is way more depressing than that.
Yeah, it's just that everybody's fucking stupid.
They're not even smart enough to be as malicious as you think.
Yeah.
You can't say, and this is where you get ideology creating conflicting thought patterns in people's minds, because you have people that say the government is fucking useless, they can't do anything, also ascribing everything to some malicious actors.
Yeah, like the same people that thought George Bush was a fucking retard, and among them was myself. A lot of them also believe that he was the center of the biggest conspiracy in human history. Like,
which one is it?
You can have one or the other, but you cannot have both of those things.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to true conspiracy, Soros and the WEF, I believe all of that stuff. Like he put $1.5 million into Gavin Newsom's recall election openly, didn't even try to hide it this time. Over the past 5 years, he's funded 275 district attorney and judge races in the United States. This foreign national billionaire. That's weird that we would allow that.
What nationality is he?
What is he? He's not German. Hold on. think he's Romanian or some shit.
Dodgy.
He's a Hungarian.
Hungarian, yeah.
Even dodgier.
Yeah, definitely dodgier. And the Klaus Schwab guy. I mean, they're taking stuff. I'm not sure. I think they're evil. I'm not sure if they're intentionally evil. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they may just be
Careless,
so
reckless.
completely out of touch that they're like, well, the only way to do this is to do it this way, right? People, the population is too big now for everybody just to homestead and own their own shit. So people need to rent from us now. And that's to us, that's a crazy thing to believe, but to them, it doesn't have to be evil to be wrong, right? But it's a lot easier to fight tooth and nail against it when you think it's evil. You know what I mean?
It's a more compelling narrative, right?
Yeah.
Who's fighting against an idiot versus fighting against a supervillain?
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how we address these issues other than to keep talking about it and try to get people more aware. I mean, crowdsourcing is pretty effective. That's why I think Twitter should definitely open source their algorithm.
What would that mean?
That means they put the AI code on the internet for everybody to see, so people can see it.
But what would
Right.
that do? What would that facilitate?
People would identify errors that are leading to unintended consequences. Right?
Well, one of the problems that you're going to have with this is the engineers. YouTube is the example that I know this about, but I'm going to imagine it Twitter as well. The engineers at YouTube don't know what the algorithm does.
Right.
They can't describe what the algorithm does because it's a reinforcement learning mechanism. And it's not that it's a black box they can't look in. It's an open box that when
It's
they
too
look in,
much
it's just
information.
fucking foreign information.
Yeah.
They don't know what's going on. So perhaps with Twitter, because it's less algorithmically manipulated, there's probably a little bit more degrees of freedom. But if you want to start opening up the beast that is the YouTube algorithm,
Yeah, good luck.
no.
Good luck. I mean, I know they have quite a bit of power as far as individual accounts and stuff like that, but as far as controlling the whole thing, doesn't seem
I don't
likely.
know. I learned this from the guy who wrote the textbook, literally wrote the textbook on artificial intelligence, sorry. And he was saying that most people are aware of the fact that social media delivers echo chambery information, right? Stuff you agree with or stuff that you hate. That's going to get the most click-throughs. What they don't realize is that there's two ways that a system can optimize for improving its recommendations in a feed. One of them is to make the recommendations better. The other one is to reprogram the agent to make their desires more predictable.
That's called manufacturing consent, right? It's the same thing that media does. It's the big lie theory, right? Manufacturing consent is you program people slowly to arrive at the truth that you want them to, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, remembering that the algorithms weren't programmed to actually do that. All they said was increase click-throughs.
Right.
That was the only optimizing function, and yet they arrived at a similar sort of...
We're describing fucking Tron, bro. Like he tells Clue to create the perfect system, and he created a dictatorial regime. Because that is, to somebody that doesn't understand nuance or have emotion or skin in the game, that is the perfect system.
That's the Matrix pods
Yeah.
of MDMA again.
Yeah. So I guess we're just fucked.
We've been everywhere in this conversation.
Yeah, it's been a long one. We've got to get out of here. I got to go to the fucking dealership. God damn it. Well, thanks for coming. We got to do this again soon.
My pleasure.
Now that you're fucking going to become a Texan, I'm going to get you a hat.
Down. I'm down.
Fucking big cowboy hat. You should also get a gun.
Can I say dang yet?
You can say whatever the fuck you want in Texas, bud.
Yes, sir.
And we'll get you some guns, too. I think you should get one on the way in, actually. Did you not get your gun?
No, sorry. Was that not supposed
No,
to
I
be?
didn't, not into the building, into Texas.
Oh, right. No.
Well,
No.
we got to fucking call the governor on that one. But yeah, thanks for coming today. This was a great conversation. Hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
My pleasure, man. Say hi to Douglas next week for
I
me.
will. Thanks.